This video is brought to you by the new PopCross Studios Dragons coloring book, available now and linked in the description. Also, even though this is mostly a compilation of older dragon videos, I have added some new alternate color schemes to a bunch of the old dragons. Which ones? I guess you'll have to watch the video to find out.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
I was recently looking back through old entries of my bestiary, reflecting on how I went about beast chronicling in my younger years versus how I do now. It is strange to think how much one's perspective on life and the world impacts the way they observe the things around them, and I think my chronicling is all the more interesting with things that I now embrace as real possibilities. One tale that I finally decided to log into my bestiary is the legend of the Draconic War, instigated by a fabled being I was reminded of recently called the Despot of Doom. He was the sorcerer king of a kingdom called Megalatveria, and allegedly had greater command over the forces of magic than almost any other being in my world's history. While tales of this being vary, the most likely accounts of him state that he came from humble beginnings and was the child of a traveling gypsy community. His mother had an obsession with magic and witchcraft. She allegedly channeled a very powerful demon into herself in an attempt to protect her community from marauders, and while she succeeded, this took a toll on her body, and she died as a result. While he was devastated by his mother's death, the young despot saw the immense power one human could channel and deemed he'd learn the same skills, but be able to use them safely. By the time he reached his adult years, he'd become powerful enough to challenge the rulers of Megalatveria and take it over for himself, making those in his traveling community members of the kingdom and granting them homes to live in. Unfortunately, his own power and pride went to his head, and he deemed he should rule over all nations of the world. This being came up multiple times when I revisited the Baxtros Peninsula recently, as it was a region he regularly tried to take over, but kept being thwarted by the 4 core species of dragons that reside there. In fact, there were times when he attempted to overthrow other nations as well, and was again thwarted by powerful dragons of the local population. The more he researched mighty dragons, the more obsessed he became with having a dragon of his own that could defeat all others, one that he could take on his invasions to ensure his victory. He attempted to search for a dragon that he could control. Some say he is even responsible for the extinction of the Titan of Death species, causing this fabled beast to be the last of its kind, because he could not force any of them to do his bidding and created a magical plague to wipe them out. Though I am skeptical of this tale, as it suggests that he could have made a similar plague to wipe out other breeds of dragons that vexed him. Anyway, eventually the despot decided, instead of trying to force a dragon to do his bidding, he would instead make a dragon. This is one of the first recorded cases of someone creating a lifeless dragon that one could step inside the body of and control themselves. Similar to the creature my love Kayla once used in a battle, which she granted the name the Smashosaurus Rex. The despot used his magic to make this lifeless dragon, even dubbing it the Victorious Doombringer, anticipating what he'd be able to do with it once completed. It was said to be the most powerful creature he could imagine, with the strengths of the greatest dragons of my world, and with the ability to amplify his own magic while he used it. But he felt the need to take it on the ultimate trial run. He captured one dragon of nearly 100 species, including the 4 breeds from the Baxtros Peninsula, an American shielded wyvern, gargantuan smasher, deathproof razortail, pimulus ant dragon, and many more beasts, whose entries I've revisited today. While it is, even now, difficult for me to believe he grew this powerful, the legends tell of a realm he was able to forge and bring these dragons to, essentially suggesting he created his own pocket dimension to battle these dragons in. This is the event referred to as the Draconic War. Because while he did bring them there to challenge himself, many of these dragons inherently did not get along and ended up battling each other as well. The legend suggests he was able to slay a massive number of these beasts, but ultimately he was still overwhelmed by them, and beaten to a point of needing to retreat. His own injuries may even have been bad enough that he lost his life soon after, as there are no more tales of his antics after this one. Some suggest that he was able to repair the damage done to his lifeless dragon before his own demise, and that it still resides dormant somewhere. I don't currently have the time to go looking for it, but if it does exist, I can only hope that the person who someday finds it has much more noble intentions with it than the Despot of Doom had. Now there's a bunch of reasons I decided to do a compilation video today. For one, the Fear of the Demon Hunters back-to-back episode finale was a lot of work, so I needed something a little bit more chill following it up. But also I felt like it was pretty fitting because, you know, the coloring book I mentioned does come out today and has a bunch of different dragons from this compilation inside the book. I'm super excited to get it out there because lots of people have asked me in the past to make a coloring book. And after looking at lots of other popular coloring books on Amazon, I saw that a lot of, even specifically the dragon coloring books, are made with AI generated art. So I have a little bit of a leg up with the fact that mine is all art that I have made. And if people do like it, I could make a bunch more. For anyone that does get it, leaving a positive 5-star review on Amazon is super helpful. But also in that you can suggest what other coloring book you would want me to make next. You know, I could do a Demons one, I could do a Mech Armors one, I could even do a Multiverse Tales one. So yeah, the link for the coloring book's in the description below. It's got 50 different dragons in it, and I hope everyone who gets it really enjoys it. But also this video gave me an excuse to do something that I decided recently I wanted to do, which is go back to some of my old dragons and give them new color schemes. Not even just dragons. I mean, I've been doing that with dragons in like the Marvel Rivals Dragons episodes that are already in this compilation at the end. But now I've even gone back to my old files. Thankfully, I still had all the old files intact for like my Captain America dragon and gave that one a Winter Soldier kind of color scheme. Like, I mean, his desaturated suit from the Winter Soldier, and just had a bunch of fun changing up some of the old colors. And also a fair reminder to everyone, or to people who are new here, after this drawing, we're jumping all the way back to the original Avengers as Dragons episode, and that was years and years ago, so there's a big change in quality, both in terms of narrating and lore and the artwork. In fact, this was the series that prompted me to start making my narrators actually have characters and be characters and have personalities. So the first few episodes, like Tayran doesn't even have a name yet. But I think that just makes this even more fun. It's a bigger timeline of going through different PopCross Studios art, all on the same theme. In terms of the Doctor Doom dragon, this was one I always meant to get back to. I did an original version of it back in the old, long time ago Fantastic Four Dragons episode, which I'll talk more about because the rebooted version of it is in this compilation. Obviously, Avengers Doomsday has started filming at the time of recording, so obviously there's a lot of hype around Doctor Doom, and I'm really excited to see what they do with him in the movies. Anyway, I've got 2 color schemes for this guy as well, and I hope you like them both. Let's take a look at them, then get into the rest of the compilation.
First up, allow me to introduce to you the Nordic Thunder Dragon, a large-scale, burly dragon that, fully grown, stands at about 150 feet high. They're mostly known for their thunderous, bellowing roar that can be heard for miles across the Nordic landscape. These dragons also breathe lightning instead of fire and can shoot blasts of electricity up to 2 miles away. But their aim at this distance isn't very good, so they've been known to cause massive destruction anytime they get into a fight, which can be kind of frequent. These beasts are very territorial and temperamental, but luckily they rarely see humans as a threat. In fact, if a village pops up in the area that they live in, the dragon can eventually become fond enough of these people that it will even protect them if they are attacked by other humans. It's unknown how many of these dragons actually exist, but it's undisputably very few, and they can actually live for thousands and thousands of years. Their power and lifespan has caused the Nordic people to see these beasts as gods. Now for this dragon, there is a lot of stuff going around my head about what of Thor to put into the character, both his visual design and his personality. So for one thing, I wanted this character to feel very big and powerful and intimidating and kind of royal even. So the pose that I knew I wanted to do it in, that I have him in here, is sort of something along the lines of a bear, like standing up on its hind legs and letting out one of its infamous bellowing roars. Just kind of, it shows off its stature, it's got its wings spread, it's got a big jaw, huge open mouth, kind of shorter legs that emphasize its larger upper body size. I just really wanted this whole thing to look powerful and intimidating. I also knew I kind of wanted to work in Thor's armor stuff a little bit, so I put a shinier sort of element along the shoulders and parts of the arm and forearms of the character to act as extra armored bits. And I also have I wanted to work in something along the lines of Thor's beard, so I gave this dragon a nice big jaw with another area of sort of metallic texture going over his lower jaw and a bit on his nose. Then I have that sort of texture going over his stomach as well, so he looks like he's got a bit of armor plating along with his kind of brown, leathery skin. I don't really know why I went with brown for the skin color. I think it was just kind of a nice contrast to the bluish, silverish color of the more armored bits. But then with the wings, I knew I wanted to go red because I wanted that to be kind of like the visual equivalent of Thor's cape. And then I splotched a couple extra red elements around just to have a little bit more consistency with the red on the rest of the character too. And overall, I think this guy turned out pretty much exactly the way I wanted him to. He looks big, he looks intimidating, so I hope y'all like him too. Here is our Nordic Thunder Dragon. Next up, we have the North American Shielded Wyvern, a mid-sized dragon that at full length, from head to tail, is about 50 feet. These wyverns are found all across what is now known as North America, and they're wandering dragons who never stay in one place very long. They are not very offensive and will in most cases flee if attacked, but they do, however, have incredible defensive capabilities as the flesh of their wings is completely impenetrable by any human-made medieval weapon. For many dragons, this area of their body is the weakest point and can be shot through to knock them out of the sky, but for this dragon, that part of their anatomy is by far their strongest feature. The shielded wyvern is also very adaptable to temperatures. Cases have even been reported of them hibernating in the far north regions of their territory, becoming completely frozen in ice, then decades later thawing out and continuing on their lives as if nothing happened. Finally, these wyverns will mate for life, and if their partner dies, they will never move on to another. Now, it's probably obvious from that description what I wanted to take out of Captain America the most was his shield. I knew I wanted to do something with his wings being a shield, partially because I really liked the idea of this pose that I ended up drawing for it, where the dragon is kind of holding up one wing, snarling at someone, and deflecting some kind of attack. It's sort of a throwback to, I kind of did something like this in the last episode, the Ninja Turtle Power Rangers one, where there's weapons flying at the characters all the time, but going back farther to my Reinhardt in Dungeons & Dragons drawing, because I really like that idea of just weapons flying at the character, them blocking some of them. It just livens up the action of the piece a little bit. Now you can see I also obviously wanted to use Captain America's colors. I'm trying to up the saturation a bit because usually when I'm doing something like fantasy drawings, my D&D episodes, I downgrade the saturation of everything a little bit because when I think medieval, I just think of a little bit more, I guess everything's kind of muddy and less shiny, which is not an accurate stereotype because if you think of, any big high fantasy castle or something, there can be very shiny armors and stuff like that. So I was trying to stay away from my go-to thing and keep the saturation nice and up, and I think that does work really well for this one. You can see another part of this one that was improvised in the moment was the ear wings, because I was like, I think that's a fun element to add in. Whenever I'm drawing dragons' heads, I always think, how many spikes and things should I add on their head? For this one, I didn't want to add too many because I wanted him to look more defensive, and spikes are a pretty, violent-looking kind of thing, so I wanted to stay away from that. But I thought for the head, those ear wings that are on the sides of Captain America's head in a lot of cases are a nice touch. And Captain America's my favorite Avenger, so I made him my favorite type of dragon, a wyvern, which is basically a dragon who's got wings instead of front arms. Think this is my favorite of the video? It's hard to say, but I hope you all like him as well. Here's our North American Shielded Wyvern. Next up, we have our first small-sized dragon, the Sokovian Scarlet Drake. Very rare and only found in southeastern Europe, and most commonly found in what will one day, at least in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, become Sokovia. This dragon can be spotted from great distances because of its vibrant, almost sickly reddish pinkish color, which is a great warning sign to anyone that they should turn and run the other direction if they see one. These drakes emit pheromones that can cause horrible hallucinations to disorient their opponents or prey. Their eyes also glow this bright yellow color that has led some to believe that they can hypnotize their prey. though any perceived hypnosis is likely also just a result of the aforementioned pheromones. These dragons, despite only growing to about 16 feet long, are incredibly dangerous and can take down opponents and creatures many, many times their size. And they do this with the pheromones, their poisonous bite, and the bright red fire that they can emit from their mouths. These drakes are also family-oriented, and often when they're born will create a pack with their siblings, who they will hunt with as long as they live. Now, Scarlet Witch isn't exactly one of the A-list Avengers, but I've mentioned on this channel before, she's one of my favorite characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think she's just so cool, and I can't wait for us to be getting more of her out of WandaVision and stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to turn her into some kind of dragon, and I wanted to go with something different than what I would usually do or think of for dragons. So I actually took more inspiration from one of my favorite real-life animals, the Komodo dragon. I also really like this idea of small scale, massive power kind of thing, because that's, sort of Scarlet Witch's thing a little bit too. She's not as big and brawny as some of the other characters in the MCU, but she's possibly the most powerful character in the franchise, up there with Thanos and Captain Marvel. I was also taking a little bit of inspiration from those really colorful rainforest frogs that are really colorful and are really deadly and poisonous, so I wanted to have the poison bite thing kind of makes me think a little bit more Black Widow just because of the, Black Widows are very deadly. But Komodo dragons have poisonous bites, and I was just, there was a bunch of different creatures and ideas that I was pulling inspiration from, along with just taking inspiration from Scarlet Witch herself. For the colors on this one, I knew I wanted to work in something other than just red while making this thing very largely red. So I've got a few tones of red in there, and then I also have a pop of yellow in the sort of, I guess, almost Spider-Man underarm wing kind of thing. Like, it's not an actual wing, it's just kind of a section of flesh. And then a little bit of yellow that I kind of conceal a bit under the character's body and belly and neck. And of course, in the eyes, to make sure the eyes pop out. So here she is, small but powerful, the Sokovian Scarlet Drake. Last but not least for today, we have the Iron-Plated Sky Dragon. Somewhat ironically named because this beast does not actually have iron plating, but its skin is very, very rare and thick and nearly as hard as iron. These dragons are also very sought after for their skin because their hides can be turned into very expensive and durable armor. These dragons, along with their hides, are well known for their speed. Their smaller frames, lighter weight, and large-scale wings make them incredible flyers that can outmatch anything else in the sky. These dragons are very drawn to gold and diamonds and treasure and will often build their nests in piles of gathered gems, although they have been found on occasion to be very empathetic towards humans, and if you manage to befriend one, it may end up sharing its wealth with you. Finally, it's not totally understood what kind of energy these dragons blast from their mouths, but what is known is that these blasts are incredibly fast, narrow, and very, very powerful. Now, when it came down to the final drawing for this video, I knew I was either gonna do Iron Man or Hulk, and there was just more visual, interesting stuff to pull from for Iron Man, and I'd already done a large-scale burly dragon with our Thor dragon, and if I was gonna do the Hulk, I would have to make it a really big, hulking kind of dragon. So I was like, all right, let's go with Iron Man. If people want me to do another video where I take more Avengers, I'll do Hulk in that one. But I really like the proportions on this dragon. It's got, along with nice big wings that I kind of curl over a little bit more so we can see more of them, I gave him some nice big legs, which I really like on dragons and dinosaur kind of creatures. And I think his head ended up looking a little bit like Blue Eyes White Dragon from Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of the shape anyway. Obviously when I color it, it's nothing like that because I'm making it red and yellow. I had considered making an actual mechanical dragon for this one, or some kind of cyborg dragon from the future, but all the other dragons in this video, I'd been doing them, more medieval, a little bit Dungeons and Dragons sort of, so I was like, I really want to stick with that, and I messed around with a few ideas of what to do with the texture of the skin, and I like what I ended up doing, sort of a different kind of scale from what I've done on the other dragons, make it a little bit shinier with a little bit of roughness to it. And then I also just like the idea of putting something on his chest like a gem, which gave me the idea to make these dragons, like treasure and jewel hoarding, which also makes sense because, Tony Stark is a billionaire, has lots of money. Halfway through this drawing I wasn't sure about it, but I really like how it ended up turning out. So I hope you all do as well. Here is our iron-plated Sky Dragon. First up, we have a dragon who is actually the last of its kind. If its species had a name, that name has been lost to history, but this final dragon is most commonly referred to simply as the Titan of Death. If you spot this colossal dragon approaching your village or city, your home will likely not be left standing by the end of the day. The Death Titan species had been a highly intelligent race of dragons who died out for unknown reasons, but they left behind treasures unlike any humanity had ever known. They were these incredible gems rumored to grant the owners untold powers. Whether or not those rumors are true, each of these gems is worth a mountain of gold. With the species believed to be long gone, humans raided their treasures and the gems were taken and sold and traded over the years and spread across the globe. But little did humanity know that there was actually one remaining dragon of this species, who had been in an isolated hibernation away from its own kind. Now awakened, the beast undyingly seeks the gems that rightfully belong to its species. Despite its name, the dragon is not actually completely malicious, and if humans are fleeing the city that the beast is attacking, it will not hunt them down and kill them. The dragon has one solitary goal: to find its gems. So it will obliterate cities in search of those gems, but if they are nowhere to be found, the dragon will leave those who have survived alone and continue on its search. This dragon has a potentially infinite lifespan and is more powerful than any dragon known to humanity. Basically, if you see this thing coming, just run the other way. Now, with the Thanos dragon, like with the Thor dragon, I knew I wanted to make him really big and menacing and intimidating, but because I knew this one would have a similar body type to the Thor one, I was kind of actively trying to think of ways to differentiate them. And one thing that also made it very easy to potentially make them similar is one of Thanos' most distinct features is his big, bumpy chin. And obviously with the Thor dragon, as I said, because of his beard, I'd given him a nice big chin as well. So I knew I wanted to go something with a big chin on this character, but also change it up. So I did the sort of narrower face and then the big Thanos bumpy chin at the end of a more narrow snout. And I really like the design on this one. I think his horn things make him look a little bit Wolverine-like, and because of the colors and how I did some of the armor on him, he looks a little bit Dragon Ball inspired. I don't know what character I'm thinking of, but someone can probably see what I'm talking about here. And then another thing with this one is, like with some of the drawings in the last piece, I don't show the dragon's entire body here. Most specifically, his wings are kind of out of the image, because I just pictured this dragon as having such colossal wings that if I tried to fit them all into the piece, it would have just obscured everything else about this dragon. And mostly, I wanted us to focus on his face and his body, and especially a really intimidating, cool Thanos dragon head. And I think it worked out. I add some more contrast to this piece after the screen recording just because I felt like it needed a little bit more detail and contrast. But besides that, we're pretty much down to the end, so I hope you like the Titan of Death. Next up, we have the Nordic Longtail, a dragon who's not particularly large in mass, having an arm span of only about 15 feet, but has a very, very long body and tail that stretches up to 125 feet in length. This dragon does not have incredible fighting capabilities in its own right, but will often hunt mid-sized animals to offer to larger, more powerful dragons, such as the Nordic Thunder Dragon. They'll befriend stronger dragons and win their trust to keep themselves protected from foes, but if their protector grows weak or is injured in battles, they'll often finish them off as a show of strength, and then steal whatever treasures their former ally had owned. These dragons have on occasion been known to befriend humans, but it is advised to anyone who comes across one to take precautions, as they are trickster dragons, and their true intentions or motives are really never known to us humans. Now this was the dragon that I was actually most excited to draw because I had the best idea for it right off the bat, and I knew it was going to be the weird one of the video. In the last video, it was the Scarlet Witch one. In the previous video from ages ago, it was probably the Chameleon Invisible Woman one. And this one, I knew I wanted a really long, snake-like dragon. But not, I considered making him a worm, spelt W-Y-R-M, like one of those massive dragons that are just kind of snakes, but I wanted a little bit more detail in this one. I wanted it to have the arms make it a little bit salamander-like almost. So I went with the just long body and regular sized arms, and I really like how this one came together, especially having the tail way out into the back of the piece. And I actually took inspiration for his tail from Loki's scepter from Avengers, even though he doesn't really have it after that movie. I just thought it was a fun element to work in, and lots of people pointed out that in the last video I should have made a big kind of club for Thor's hammer on the tail of the Thor dragon. So I was like, let's put something like that in this one, even though it's not as essential to Loki's character. Something that changed while I was making this one is when I'd started it, as mentioned, I was going for a snake-like character. I had thought of doing a more snake-like head, but a lot of the snake head designs that I like are kind of fatter, and I wanted everything about this dragon to be really skinny and narrow and long, so I went with a head that was more inspired by those really thin-nosed crocodiles, and I think that worked really well for this piece. It is weird, but weird in a way that I'm really into for this one. I felt like I could really stretch my legs creatively with this design because I knew going in it was gonna be a bit odd. I think the only thing I might not love about this one is that the golden armor bits on him kind of look like separate parts from the character. Like, they're not actually attached to him. It's almost as if he's wearing some extra armor, and I'd rather it just looked biological, but I don't know, maybe that's me. You can tell me what you think in the comments. But overall, I'm super pleased with this one, and I hope you all like it as well. Here is the Nordic Longtail. Next up, we have a dragon that will look familiar, as it's a subspecies of a dragon that we've discussed previously. This is the albino iron-plated sky dragon, a very rare breed of sky dragon, and whenever one of these are born, they are rejected and cast out from their family. Living alone from such a young age, these dragons rarely make it to adulthood, often either being killed and eaten by another larger dragon, or being hunted down by humans for their very rare hide. Because of this, albino sky dragons that do make it to adulthood are very hostile and offensive. They trust nobody, not members of their own species, and definitely not humans. In fact, because most albino sky dragons have at some point in their early lives had to flee from attacking humans, these dragons are often very resentful of humanity and are likely to attack humans when they see them. Despite their name, albino sky dragons are more of a silver color with red eyes and red wings that seem to be nature's ghoulish warning of how dangerous these beasts are compared to other members of their species. Now with this drawing, I was a little bit conflicted about going with a variation on the Iron Man dragon design from the last video because it felt a little bit lazy, but it also just seemed like such a perfect idea of having Ultron be the same species as Iron Man, but a more violent version of that. And of course, because he's got a lightish, silverish kind of color, and he's got red eyes, the albino angle kind of worked really well. And of course, I'm talking movie origins. It makes sense for them to be the same species. Obviously, in the comics, Ultron was created by Ant-Man, but I'm going mostly off of movie designs, so I felt like that really fit. I hope people don't mind that this one looks very similar to the Iron Man one. I also felt like it gave me a good excuse to try drawing this dragon again, but from a different, more interesting angle and in a different pose. Because I liked how the Iron Man one turned out, but the pose was a little bit meh. Having his head flat sideways to us was a little bit boring, so I like this a lot better, especially what I did with this character's head. His mouth being open and a bit of saliva splashing from his mouth added some nice movement to the piece, and I like this one better just because of the colors. Since he's very desaturated, silvery, gray-y, the red on his wings and eyes really stands out nicely. I'm also playing around a little bit more with my backgrounds in this video. I think all of the dragons I draw in this one, I give them some kind of background or environment. They're simple ones, but I think it ups the quality of these a little bit. It was a nice fun challenge, though it did make this video take longer to make. But anyway, here he is, Ultron as the albino iron-plated sky dragon. Finally, we have the Crimson-Crested Hydra, a mid-sized dragon who lives in Northern Europe, likely to have originated in Greece, potentially having migrated for a cooler climate. This is a species of dragon that gets along with none other. The Crimson Hydra seems almost offended by the existence of other dragons and exclusively hunts other dragons for its food. Killing these creatures is quite difficult because, as the tale goes for all Hydras, if you cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place. Despite this dragon's common appearance of having multiple fully red heads, these dragons are actually born with gray heads, with 2 red marks on the crests of their brows. But every time that a head is severed and 2 more grow back to take its place, the heads and necks come back redder and redder each time. And as you might expect, each time a new head is sprouted, the dragon becomes more and more dangerous. So it's ill-advised to pick a fight with these dragons because you're more likely to just make it more powerful. Finally, ending with a fun fact of this species, there is a rumor that one of these Hydras is actually in possession of one of the Titan of Death's gems. Rumor has it that the Hydra devoured a human who carried the gem, and now the Hydra has it and keeps it hidden away in its mountain home. Now, when it clicked into my head to do Red Skull as a Hydra, it was just like, oh, how did I not think of that immediately? I mean, you know, he runs Hydra, making them a Hydra. It's just a perfect... So that was probably obvious to a lot of people, but it didn't come to me right away, and I'm so glad it did, because I mentioned in the last video how I have a deck of Magic the Gathering cards that's all dragons, and I'm obsessed with dragons and all that. Well, I am actually obsessed with Hydras even more. I have a separate Magic the Gathering deck that is specifically Hydras, and as a kid, I used to love drawing the Hydra from the Disney animated Hercules movie, and so the idea of drawing this was super exciting, but also, when I started into it, I realized just how daunting this one was gonna be. Luckily, I saved this one for a different day. I drew all the other dragons on the first day and this one on its own the second day because it took so much longer than the other ones, because figuring out the position for each head and drawing each of those heads at a slightly different angle after having to, you know, initially design the head to both look cool and look kind of like Johann Schmidt, our Red Skull here, it was just... There was a lot going on with this one. I think it ended up coming together really nicely. I like the pose of this one, all the dragons looking off to the side. But I think this one ends up looking less detailed than the other ones, even though I spent a lot longer on it, because I spent most of that time figuring out how each of the different heads were gonna work and where they were gonna go, and then rendering the different heads. It was, you know, it's just the kind of piece that the end result doesn't really show off how long the piece took to make. But that sounds like I'm complaining. I still really like how this one turned out. I like that I have the Red Skull nose worked in there. And you can see I also gave him a bit of a frilled underneck thing, kind of like the thing I'd put on Loki's back. That was to make it look a little bit aquatic, because I know the Hydra logo is, you know, a skull with tentacles, you know, like an octopus has, so I was like, okay, let's put a little bit of aquatic stuff into this design. But also, talking about that, why is the Hydra logo not a Hydra? What does a skull with tentacles have to do with Hydra? Anyway, that's a silly thing. But anyway, I hope you all like our last dragon of this episode, the Crimson-Crested Hydra. Our first dragon of the day is large in scale, but nearly unmatched in weight. The colossal Slavic steelback can grow up to 80 feet in height, standing on all fours, but weighs nearly 2,000 tons. For reference, a full-grown blue whale stretches to about 80 feet in length and weighs about 190 tons. The unbelievable weight is a result of the steelback's biological metal that can be up to 2 feet thick, running along its lower legs, wings, tail, head, and of course, running along its back. The dragon often appears very turtle-like, as in a relaxed state, its wings sit on its back like a shell. These large metal wings are not actually any good for flying, as the creature is far too heavy to get off the ground, but it uses these wings to protect its non-metal parts of its body. These dragons can be devastating in battle because of their mass and incredible strength, but they're largely a peaceful species and will usually only fight if protecting other, smaller dragons from predators. Now, I don't know why this has become a theme, but with this video, like with the last 2 dragon videos, I've started with the biggest dragon of the batch. I don't really know why, but it seems like a lot of people like the really big, burly ones. They're not as specifically my kind of thing. I like the leaner, wyvern-type dragons more, but I do really like how a few of these big ones have turned out. And with this video, because I'm going to be doing more dragon stuff now, because everyone's super into it, I'm having a lot of fun with it, I really wanted to take more inspiration from different animals and make sure that I'm not repeating myself too much. So I experiment more with the styles of the dragons in this. This one is probably still a little bit similar to the other large-scale dragons, like Thanos and Thor from the previous episodes, but I wanted to make sure this one stayed on all fours, didn't really come up off its hind legs, and took a little bit of inspiration from, as mentioned, turtles, and also kind of bulls. I was just thinking of big, tough, hulking kind of animals to take inspiration from for this, and that's where the idea for those big, curved metal horns came from. I probably could have scaled them up more, and after I drew some of the dragons in this video, I was looking at creature designs from Monster Hunter because I really love the designs in that game and people have been recommending that I do some art from that. And there are some crazy awesome dragons in that I think I'm gonna pull more inspiration from in the future because the proportions are really cool and some of them have some massive horns going on. Also, drawing this one really made me want to do Colossus's sister, Magik. Maybe I'll do a New Mutants as Dragons episode down the line when that movie eventually comes out, even though it's been postponed for 1,000,000 years. But I really like Magik as a character, and I really like how this dragon turned out. So I hope you all liked the first one of this video, the Colossal Slavic Steelback. Next, we have a dragon that is rumored to be unkillable. Whether that's true or not, these beasts are incredible at recovery from damage. The death-proof Razortail has such incredible healing abilities that, like some small lizards, it can fully regrow limbs after having them severed, though it can take up to about a week for limbs to fully regrow. And while they have such incredible healing ability, they are often left with large scars from recovered wounds, which means most of these dragons, when fully grown, will be coated in scars. See, these creatures are very prone to getting in fights with other dragons. Razortails are aggressively playful, meaning they easily get on the nerves of other dragons they interact with, who are often more stoic and reclusive animals. This will lead those dragons to try and kill the Razortail, but of course, often finding that task rather difficult. The Razortail is fast, agile, and of course has a very sharp blade on the end of its tail that it can use to fight when need be. Though often these dragons aren't looking for a fight, but simply enjoy pestering their fellow species mates. Now with Deadpool, I wanted to make him a really cool dragon. I thought of leaning more into the comedic side of things, but I don't know, Deadpool, well, he is really funny, he's also a really cool character, and I just wanted a lot of that coolness in there. So I basically thought of, what is the iconic look for a dragon to me personally? And I mean, I've talked in previous videos about how I really like wyverns, but I didn't want to do a wyvern for this one again because I did that for Captain America, and I was like, okay, let's just do the classic dragon design and implement the elements of the character that I obviously need in there. So the tail with the blade, and I really wanted to have one limb kind of cut off, and it's partway through growing back, so he's got that tiny little baby arm like Deadpool has in the first movie, and he has with his legs in the second movie. Then I add the scars as well. I probably should have added more of those based on the description that I gave, but besides all that, I just drew him how I picture a classic awesome dragon. Took a little bit of inspiration from the Game of Thrones dragons, but of course those are wyverns, and then just went at it. And I think this has the right balance of what I wanted. It's mostly cool, but has that little bit of goofiness in there with the tiny little droopy arm growing back. So I hope you all like it as well. Here is the Death-Proof Razor Tail. On the topic of potentially unkillable dragons, next we have the Great Canadian Terror Claw. Anyone who has ever claimed to have killed one of these beasts has never had any proof, leading many to believe that they too are unkillable. The Terror Claw is a breed of Zburator, which is a species of part wolf, part dragon creatures, though this specific breed more resembles a Wolverine than a wolf. It's unknown if these creatures too can regrow their limbs, because nobody has ever managed to sever a limb from one of these dragons. Their bones are coated in a near unbreakable biological metal, with stability unlike any material known to man. The only metal with similar durability is that on the wings of the American shielded wyvern. While in a relaxed state, these dragons seem to have paws similar to that of a bear, but when threatened, razor-sharp steel claws that hide in their forearms spring out over their normal claws. These dragons are lone wolves, so to speak, living in forests and trying to keep away from other species. They have incredibly keen senses, and when they smell any human or other dragon encroaching onto their territory, they'll let out a loud howl that echoes through the forest to ward off any intruders. But if said intruders don't leave soon, the Terror Claw will fly into a berserker rage and slice down anyone who gets too close. While these beasts are very short and stout by dragon standards, growing not much larger than a grizzly bear, they are some of the deadliest beasts that you'll find in the North American wilderness. Now with this one, I'm a little bit mixed on the result because I do really like how it turns out, but I think I leaned a little bit too much into the Wolverine Zburator, I don't know if I was pronouncing that right, Zburator kind of look, and this ends up looking almost more like a werewolf with wings than like a dragon, which, you know, I want to keep things varied up. I want to do a lot of different types of dragons, so in that regard I like it, but I also think I probably could have done something a little more dragon-like for Wolverine. I mean, Wolverine's such an awesome character. He would make a pretty awesome-looking wyvern or something more in line with what I did with Deadpool. So I don't know, I really like how this looks, but could have been a bit more dragon-like. Maybe if I do something down the line with Laura Kinney Wolverine, who's one of my personal favorite comic book characters of all time, I can do something like this, but a little bit more dragon-esque. I don't know. Either way, it was fun taking some inspiration from Wolverines. I had images of Wolverines up on my other screen and was referencing their kind of faces and their big scary mouths and their kind of canine-like teeth. Also, as I'm wrapping up, special shout out to my friend Logan X, who, as you can imagine from that name, one of his favorite characters of all time is Wolverine. So Logan X, I hope you and everyone else really like the result of the Great Canadian Terror Claw. Our next dragon is one that you'll rarely find in a fight. The Germanic cave crawler is another rather small dragon, only growing to about 30 feet in length, and is very skilled at evading predators. They have nimble, light frames that help them move incredibly quickly. They have sticky padded feet that allow them to climb along the walls of the caves that they live in, but most impressively, they seem able to teleport away when most threatened. Instead of breathing fire, these dragons spit dark purple smoke that, as soon as it dissipates, these dragons are nowhere to be seen. It's unknown whether they actually can teleport or not, but in any case, if you see their smoke, you won't be seeing them again anytime soon. Despite their devil-like tails, these dragons are very non-aggressive. If you move slowly and calmly and treat their home with respect, they have even been known to lead travelers through their caves. Essentially, if you're kind to them, they will be kind to you. Now, this was actually the first dragon that I drew for this video, and I really like the result. It's, again, one of those ones where I have more animal inspiration than some of the others. Like, this one looks very gecko-like, which makes sense because I was referencing geckos for it. I also wanted to make this one have some bumps to it, but I wanted it to be a lot less textured than some of the other ones. I wanted it to look really smooth and slick and a little bit moist and wet. So what I do for this one is I don't add my grainy texture to it that I do to most of my other dragons and creatures and character drawings in general. What I do is I add that grain to all of the stones and rocky bits around the character, and then I just try to make the character nice and shiny without the texture to it. The result is a nice change. I still really like that texture on things, and I think it could have worked decently for this, but I'm glad that I varied it up a little bit for this one. And in general, I had a lot of fun drawing this one, and I really like how it turns out. Something else that you'll notice probably with the previous drawings and with this one is I do change a few things after the screen recording's done, most specifically with the background. I kind of reframe the background a little bit after the time lapse, but I just figure most people are here to see the drawing of the creature, and when I'm messing around with the background, I really have to zoom in and out, in and out, in and out a whole bunch to fix things and tweak things, and on a screen recording super sped up, that just is super dizzying and I don't bother putting it in. With all that said, drawing's coming to a close. I really hope you all enjoy the Germanic Cave Crawler. Finally for today, we have the Kenyan Weatherwing, a dragon that is rarely found lower than the highest mountain peaks of its African home. It's unknown why, but wherever these dragons go, a storm follows. This has led many to consider these dragons to be deities. In the worst times of drought, their presence is praised for bringing rains that can save crops and lower temperatures. These dragons grow to about 150 feet in length, but are quite light-bodied. They have no limbs save for their massive wings. They can remain airborne for weeks at a time and often hide in the clouds that follow them, with massive winds kicking up under their wings to keep them airborne even while they sleep. While these dragons are rather non-combative, anytime they are in a battle, the storms that follow them seem to protect them, whether shooting lightning at opponents or stirring up torrential winds to blow foes away. These dragons are rarely seen, but when they are, it is often considered a blessing upon any eyes that lay sight on them. Now with Storm, I was taking inspiration both from the look in the reference image I have of Storm in this video, and also from Mohawk Storm. I don't know if there's a specific name for that look she has, but you can see I put kind of a mohawk sort of frill on this dragon's head, and I was actually taking some inspiration from sea monsters for this one, even though it's a weather dragon that stays up in the sky. And when I think of Storm, I always think of kind of elegant, graceful, and godlike, which is kind of what I was thinking with the Thor dragon, but obviously kind of different because Thor is a bit more of a bruiser, and I just really like the idea of this dragon that stays up in the air and people kind of praise it for saving them in a different kind of way than in battle, by bringing rain to areas that really need it. This is another one where I'm a little bit mixed on the result, because I really like how the composition and the final image turns out, especially when I add a bit of clouds and lightning in after the screen recording's over, but I think the texturing on this one is a little bit weaker than some of the others, just because it's, I don't know about other people, but I find it a little bit boring rendering out a long, really skinny kind of character. I think it worked out a little bit better on the Loki dragon because I had more of him kind of going out into the background and I could fade part of him out, whereas this one, it's all kind of on a similar-ish plane. Also, I probably could have focused more on specific parts of this dragon, cropped it in a little bit. But either way, I still really like this one, just maybe not as much as some of the others. But I hope you all enjoy it and all the other dragons in this episode. Here she is, the Kenyan Weatherwing.
I'm just chucking this in partway through the compilation as a kind of quicker drawing because people who have been around the channel for a long time will probably remember I did an episode where I redrew a bunch of old art a couple years back, and one of the dragons I redrew, or one of the characters I redrew, was that Storm Dragon from the X-Men Dragons episode, because I hadn't been super happy with how it turned out, and I ended up making a way cooler version of it. Again, this was like 2 years later, so timeline-wise, I'm kind of throwing this in at the wrong spot, but I figured I might as well put it in after we just got the original Storm Dragon drawn. I didn't add any new lore in the episode where I was redrawing a bunch of old characters and creatures. It was more like a art journey motivation kind of episode in terms of the things I was talking about, but I do really love how this dragon turned out. I was experimenting with light wrap around its wings for the lightning coming down behind it. Might have been one of the first drawings where I had rain actively coming down in the piece and bouncing off the creature. So yeah, I thought this was a good place to just chuck this one in before we move into the next episode, and I hope you all enjoy the redone version of the Storm Dragon.
Our first dragon of the day is indeed quite large, but also very thin and non-combative. A bit boring to look at when in its resting state, so instead, we'll be taking a look at the Gargantuan Smasher after it's been hit with a rush of adrenaline. See, when this dragon gets scared, anxious, and most specifically, angry, an overwhelming surge of adrenaline pumps through its veins and its musculature massively expands. It nearly triples in size, and its skin shifts to a vibrant green color, and purple veins pulse through its body. The dragon also has a series of armored plates across its body that protect it both in its small form and its large state. But as it grows, these plates are pulled from each other, revealing the creature's purple underbelly. This could be seen as the creature's weakness in that larger state, but in actuality, those areas are still incredibly tough and difficult to puncture with even the strongest spears and swords. The only thing that has been known to calm these creatures' rampages when they are enraged is, oddly enough, a well-sung lullaby, though there are few confirmed cases of this actually working. One final thing to note is that these dragons do not have claws, but of course this doesn't stop them from being incredibly destructive and formidable beasts, as the massive fists on their wings can smash through solid rock, and their heavily armored tails are powerful enough to level a small mountain, given enough swings. The best thing to do if you ever come across one of these beasts is simply to not make it angry. Trust me, you won't like it when it's angry. Now, one of the most requested Avengers off of the back of the last Avengers episode was to do the Hulk as a dragon. And I've spoken before in other episodes about how when I'm doing Avengers stuff and turning Avengers into anything else, I tend to avoid the Hulk, not because I don't like him, I think he's awesome, but there's not a ton going on with him visually. He's kind of just a big muscular green dude in purple shorts. But a few people in the comments suggested making the Hulk dragon a dragon that was really small and grew, and I loved that idea, and so obviously I went with it. But the other thing that I decided to do was I decided to look at this character differently. Instead of going, well, the Hulk is a really simple design, so I gotta make the dragon a simple design, I said, okay, well, the Hulk's a simple design, I gotta take the main stuff about the Hulk that people want, make it a big dragon, make it really muscular, make it green, put a bit of purple in there, and then I can just take some creative liberties and do whatever I want with the rest of the design, as long as I don't change it up too much. And admittedly, I think the plating makes it look a little bit less Hulk-like. It almost seems like something that would have worked well for my The Thing dragon from the Fantastic Four episode that I did a million years ago. But either way, I really love how this dragon turned out. I think it's one of my absolute favorites from all of the dragon videos so far, so I hope you all like it too. Here is our Hulk dragon, the Gargantuan Smasher. Our next dragon is the wingless orbital marvel. Much of this creature's existence is shrouded in mystery, and some have even theorized that it's not of this Earth. These dragons spend much of their time soaring through the Earth's upper atmosphere, despite the fact that they have no wings with which to fly. Nobody is certain how they remain airborne, but the common theory is that if these dragons aren't from outer space, then they are just magic. As these dragons spend much of their time out of sight, humans have rarely made contact with them, and on the rare occasions when we have, no one has managed to slay one. They're incredibly agile flyers, and of course with no wings to pierce, it's doubly difficult to bring them out of the air. Plus, their hides are incredibly durable, and they're seemingly as tough across their entire bodies as the North American shielded wyvern's famously unbreakable wings. They also don't breathe fire, or really any substance that we can comprehend. The energy is a multicolored glow that can be fired as a powerful beam to incredibly destructive results. Rumor has it that the Titan of Death once dueled with one of these creatures, and the orbital marvel managed to cause significant damage to the Titan before returning to the upper atmosphere. While many would love the opportunity to study these creatures, because they are rarely seen by human eyes, many who do have the privilege of spotting one simply choose to stare and marvel at these incredible dragons. Now with Captain Marvel, I knew I wanted to try something a bit alien. I wanted this one to seem like it could be from outer space, but maybe wasn't. And I think the thing that sells that the best is what I end up doing with the eye. I make it all kind of black with just some like shiny glints in it, almost looking a little bit like your classic alien look. And then I also gave it some antennas that, as I was drawing it, I was like, well, this makes her look a little bit like Mantis. But once I got into the coloring stage, I think that kind of clears it up and fixes it and makes it very clear that this is a Captain Marvel dragon. I also knew that I wanted to do a dragon that didn't have wings but could still fly, because I haven't really done any of those yet. I've done dragons without wings, but they were non-flying dragons. This one, for Captain Marvel, I wanted it to be kind of confusing why this dragon can fly. So I took inspiration from traditional Chinese dragons, the ones that are like have arms and legs but have long snake-like bodies and just kind of wiggle fly through the air. I thought that was a really cool idea, and even though Captain Marvel's not a Chinese character, thought that would work really well for the design of this one. This is probably the weird one of the episode, but I really like how it turned out. Everything came together the way I was hoping it would, and I hope you all like it as well. Captain Marvel as the wingless orbital marvel. Next, we have a very friendly forest dragon called the Dracarachnia, named as such for the spider-like qualities these dragons have. They don't have paws or feet, but instead have sharp and sticky spikes at the ends of their many limbs that they use to cling to trees in the woods that they reside in. These dragons also have mandibles on the sides of their mouths, from which they can fire a sticky gray substance, similar to spiders' webs, with which to ensnare their prey. But despite their spider-like qualities, many consider these dragons to be quite pleasant to behold. Their bright red and blue coloring stands out very vividly in their wooded homes. These dragons are incredibly agile due to their light frame and a winged tail that allows them to make quick turns and spins to dodge around trees as they soar through the forest. Dracarachnias are very welcoming of humans and will often come greet travelers camping in their home areas. They're also eager to please and befriend other dragons. In their region, these dragons often come in contact with iron-plated sky dragons, and the Dracarachnia will often gather artifacts left by humans in the forest to bring as offerings to sky dragons in order to win their favor. These dragons are energetic and playful, and their positive attitude towards other species make them one of the most beloved dragons of any who has ever encountered one. Now for Spider-Man, I knew going in that this had to be one of my best dragons yet. I mean, he's one of my personal favorite characters in comics and movies, and I know he's a lot of other people's favorite characters too. So the thing that was going to be a bit tricky about this one was I obviously wanted to take inspiration from spiders, but I also didn't want to make this character creepy and unsettling looking. I wanted him to be a friendly neighborhood dragon, so to speak. So I did stuff like give him extra eyes, but I also made them very gleamy and friendly, gave him almost a bit of a smile on his face. I made him bright and vibrant, and I didn't make his extra limbs creepy and hairy like a spider's would be. As I mentioned in the X-Men Dragons video, I was also looking even more at Monster Hunter designs because the dragons in that are so incredibly cool looking, and I wanted to expand my visual library of dragon and monster elements, so I tried to not obviously rip off anything outright, but I took a lot of ideas from the creatures in that, and one of them that I'd pulled from a dragon in that series was giving this character's wings sort of butterfly-like features, making them kind of shiny and a bit insect-like, even though spiders aren't insects, but, you know, similar. And in the end, I do really love how this one looks, especially with the little environment that I throw in the back, so I hope you all like it as well, the Dracarachnia. Our final dragon of the day is another forest dragon, but one that resides among the trees in East Africa. The long-fanged prowler is a nocturnal dragon that stalks the woods in the night, often only spotted by its glowing yellow eyes, or when it steps into a clearing and can be fully illuminated by the moon on a cloudless night. These dragons have anatomy similar to that of large jungle cats, but their skin is coated in very tough scales. They have wings large enough with which to fly, but often stay close to the ground, hiding in the shadows of the night to watch over all the activity of the forest. They have no specific qualms with humans, but if anyone comes to their homes to hunt dragons or any other forest-dwelling creatures, these dragons will turn the hunters into the hunted and devour the poachers. The Longfangs can breathe fire, but not frequently. As they're in battle with humans or other dragons, they'll slowly be charging up a blast. The more prominent the purple lines across their bodies get, the closer they are to firing and the further away from them you want to be. The purple fire that they breathe is far hotter than a normal flame and can be shot at speeds of up to 200 kilometers an hour. But once fired, they must wait a while to charge up another blast. These dragons are highly territorial, but an incredibly graceful sight to behold. Respect them and their homes, and they will extend the same courtesy towards you. Now with the Black Panther dragon, I messed around a ton with how to do the wings on this one. I feel like I struggle with that a little bit on a lot of these, just figuring out how to position an extra pair of limbs. Because obviously the more limbs a character has, the harder it is to figure out a fitting pose for them that's not obscuring too much of their body with the wings. So I really tried to tuck the wings in on its back, make it look like it's stalking around in the night. I also knew I wanted to have the wings on this one because if I didn't put them in, it would look too much like just a scaly panther. I wanted it to have, you know, dragon elements. It's supposed to look like a dragon. In the last episode, the X-Men one, there were a few dragons that, while I liked them, I felt like I was taking a little bit too much animal inspiration, and they looked more like regular monsters and not quite enough like dragons. Didn't want that to happen with this one, and even though it's not my favorite of the video, I think it does look like a nice blend of panther and dragon. Also, felt weird naming him Prowler because there is a Marvel character named the Prowler, but it's just such a cool word and fits so well with this character. So I hope you all like the last dragon of the video, the Long-Fanged Prowler.
Something strange has been happening in my world. A wave of new dragons have been showing up in the Americas in the last few weeks, none of whom I'd ever heard the slightest rumors about before. Now, I don't claim to know every dragon and creature in existence in my world. In fact, I've discovered dozens of new ones in the last few months as it is. But these ones are appearing in a region I'm very familiar with, and they're so powerful and destructive that it's highly unlikely I'd not at least have heard about them before. It's as though they're arriving here just now from somewhere else. Regardless of how they're showing up, though, they're here and I've spent the last week studying them, trying to figure out how best to protect the residents of my world from them. The first to really catch my attention was the amorphous sand dragon. This creature is far more inherently magical in its anatomy than most other dragons in my world. Its external anatomy seems to be completely made up of sand that it can resize and reshape to create weapons and bury itself in the sand and earth. It can even absorb more sand to make itself larger and larger. Thus far, I've yet to discover if it does have organs and a skeleton beneath its sandy external self, but the presence of teeth and claws in its mouth and paws would suggest that to be the case. This dragon isn't quite as hostile as some of the others that have shown up, but it certainly isn't friendly if approached by humans or other dragons. And like the others that have been popping up, they all seem to be targeting and hunting one specific species of dragon, but I'll elaborate more on that in a moment. Now with the Sandman dragon, I knew I was going to have fun right off the bat going into this one, because I've found in the last little while a lot of my best designs come from creatures that have sort of amorphous shifting bodies, because it's just built into them that I can really stretch the proportions because they can grow and shrink their limbs and stuff. And weirdly enough, for this design, I actually had an idea for the flow of the pose before anything else. I knew I wanted one arm kind of swooping down that leads us up towards the creature's head. And then once I got into drawing that, I realized it would be cool to have the body kind of swinging back and the whole thing making a bit of a figure eight, where the tail swoops in behind and goes back down to the sand. And that overall is my favorite part of how this piece turns out, just the flow of the character's body. I also knew texturing the character was going to be fun because I could just up the amount of grain and grit and texture on the character because he's, you know, all rocky and sandy. So I was rendering him similarly to how I would the demons in my Phobias as Demons episodes, or most of them, not the like slimy sorts of ones. Body-wise, this one's a fairly generic shape as far as dragons go. If I went back through my dragon episodes, I'd probably find it's a similar shape that I've done for a lot of other dragons. But I'm okay with that for this one because there's just the built-in stretching of the proportions for the hands, and I feel like there's enough different about this one that it having a similar body shape to other dragons isn't really too much of a problem. But I did know I really wanted to shake up the proportions and do something weird with the next dragon. But we'll get into that one in a sec. First, we gotta take a look at the finished version of this one. Now this next one I've debated with myself whether or not to classify it as a dragon. It certainly has the necessary traits, but it's so odd in its anatomy that it's difficult for me to decide definitively. This is the Octavian Claw Drake, the first of these new creatures that I started hearing stories about a few weeks back. It has a hunched, rotund body with a head that somewhat resembles an octopus. It has a set of regular arms and legs common to other dragons, but it moves around using an extra set of 4 tentacle-like arms that spawn from its mid-back. Between these arms, there is a patagium flesh, meaning the membrane many dragons or other flying creatures have for the hide of their wings, but this creature hasn't shown the ability to use this to fly. Still, it doesn't need flight to be highly mobile, as its extra arms have proven very capable of maneuvering its odd body quickly through any terrain. The Octavian has also proven to be highly intelligent. As I initially tracked it from above astride my dragon mount, Violet, the creature showed no sign of noticing our presence for a while, but it eventually pulled a massive branch from a tree, peeled off the leaves with its tentacle, and hurled it up at us, practically striking us from the sky. As we evaded, it bolted into a thick woods and escaped from our sight for quite some time. It has not shown able to breathe fire or lightning or any such substance, but with its extra limbs and cunning mind at its disposal, I wouldn't suggest that it's lacking in its ability to hold its own in a fight. Like the other dragons that have shown up, this one immediately set off hunting one specific species native to my world, Dracarachnias, one of the earliest species that I ever studied. It's an odd target as this species of dragons is one of the friendliest I've come across, both to humans and other dragons. I hope to discover why these new species are hunting the Dracarachnias, but at least for now, the pleasant red dragons have been protecting themselves quite well, as they themselves are not a species one should underestimate. Now this is my favorite one of the episode easily, probably because it's the weirdest. Designing this one, I was in the same sort of mindset as how I would design a demon for the Phobias as Demons series, because that's the series where I feel like I just push myself the most into doing whatever weird thing comes to mind, regardless of whether it makes sense or not from an anatomy perspective. And I feel like I should just use that sort of mindset more, because I feel like it does just end up giving me some of the coolest stuff I design. I mean, this thing's long, gangly tentacle arms definitely wouldn't actually be able to hold it up, but who cares? It ends up looking really cool, and that's what matters. Also, it representing Dr. Octopus, which I think this one, of all the ones I do in the episode, you'd be least likely to look at it and know immediately that it's supposed to be Dr. Octopus, but especially the movie version doesn't really have as much of a distinct colorful costume, so it was kinda harder to put some costume elements into the hide of this creature. Still, I think the arms do a pretty good job showing that it's Dr. Octopus. But I don't know, you can all let me know what you think in the comments. Either way, I really love how this weird octopus sort of frog-looking dragon turned out, and I hope you all like it as well. Let's take a look. The next dragon to appear was a very gangly, eerie-looking creature, but one with incredible flight capabilities. This is the gliding sky goblin. It's a wyvern with a semi-humanoid head and vibrant green and purple body. It can soar through the skies at nearly 300 miles per hour and maneuver through mountain peaks and trees with surprising grace even at these high speeds. This dragon, despite its narrow frame, has proven to be incredibly strong and to have one of the most instantly lethal flame breaths I've ever seen. It spits an orange flame in small round bursts that explode on impact, and within seconds anyone struck by the eruption will be left with nothing but their skeleton remaining. In battles with Dracarachnias, the Sky Goblin has shown that its wings double as effective shields. As I've discussed in the past, on many dragons their wings are the most vulnerable point on their body, but there are certain exceptions. This dragon's wings don't appear to be quite as tough as a species like the American shielded wyvern, but they certainly do have an extra layer of protective plating nearly as strong as metal that can block projectiles or other violent strikes from foes. This dragon has also shown to essentially announce its presence to its prey, even in a case where it could have approached more subtly. It has a roar that comes across more like a cackling laugh that it emits before soaring down to strike a foe. It's clearly quite confident in its ability to win without sneaking up on prey, but like with the previous hostile dragons, thus far Dracarachnias have shown their ability to best these violent foes. Now this one, in terms of proportion and all that, it pretty much came across exactly as I was hoping. The one thing I don't love about it is the pose. Just feels like it's a little bit bland. I don't know when I started doing this. I used to do a lot, or pretty much all of my dragon drawings in horizontal, like landscape mode, and now a lot of the time I'm doing a lot of them as portraits, more vertical, and I'm finding I like the vertical ones a lot more. I don't know if that's just because I wanted to vary things up from how I used to do things more often, or if I do just come up with better poses when I'm doing them vertically, but for whatever reason I feel like doing this one landscape made it slightly less interesting than some of the other ones. But all that is kind of just a nitpick. I do like how the design turned out of this one. I did up the saturation a bunch from what Goblin looks like in the movies, and I added a lot more purple in. In the movies, he kind of only has purple on his glider, and even in that, it's pretty desaturated. So I pumped up the colors a bit more, maybe even a little bit too much, pulled a bit of inspiration from the comic book versions of the character, and I think all of that paired together ended up turning into a pretty cool design for a goblin dragon. His head might have turned out a little bit too humanoid, but at least it's different from a lot of my other dragon head designs. Hope you all like the result. Let's take a look at the finished version. The final one for today may actually be a creature I'd studied a while back. In a way. See, some time ago I'd been following a Dracarachnia that had been infected by some kind of symbiotic parasite that had coated over its body and made it change color, as well as have significantly improved strength and speed. Though it also made it more aggressive than the species is commonly known to be. I'd lost track of that dragon, but some in its area claimed that the dragon had rid itself of the parasite and the thing had slunk off to find a new host. Now, all these years later, the venomous slime dragon appears. This creature has similar features to the infected Dracarachnia, but is significantly larger and has very different anatomy. The venomous slime dragon can morph different parts of its body into weapons, like the sand dragon can. Plus, it can also unhinge its jaw to help it devour near any foe in very few bites, and it has teeth that seem able to carve through anything. It also has a voracious appetite. It hunts and eats nearly 3 times what a dragon of its size normally would. The creature has also shown to have a significant weakness to loud noises, which I first discovered when it came across an albino echo imp that easily immobilized the dragon with a quick cannon of sound. The creature both writhed in pain at the sound and also began to shrink, as though the black ooze of its body was retracting in on itself. I believe there is another dragon somewhere under all that parasitic slime, but I've yet to see its original form to definitively say that this is just another dragon that's been infected. This dragon too seems to have it out for the Dracarachnias, but not as aggressively as some of the others. Plus, on occasion, I did spot this creature defending humans from some other dragons, though that may have been a coincidence and it was just hunting those dragons for a meal. Now this one I knew had to be a really good one, because obviously turning stuff into dragons is a big series on this channel, but so is venomizing stuff. Plus I've done a bunch of venomized dragons in the past in my Famous Dragons Venomized episode, so I knew this one had to be a cut above those ones. I was actually taking a lot of inspiration for this one from one of my own drawings from a few weeks ago, the Dark Spyro dragon from the Skylanders as Monsters episode, because that I think is one of the best drawings I've ever done. It's one of my favorite dragon designs I've done. I was taking a lot of Monster Hunter inspiration for it. The pose was cool, the face was cool, just everything about it. I really liked that one. So I was like, I want to do a dragon drawing that good, but with this one, with this premise, because obviously this was going to be a really fun premise to work with. I don't think I like this one quite as much as that Dark Spyro dragon, but I do still really like how this one turns out. I think it's definitely one of my cooler dragons. I've noticed from this episode that I gotta play around with how I do skies and clouds. I'm getting a little bit too repetitive. The clouds and stars are looking a little bit too generic and boring, but that's something I'll play around with in some of my future episodes. Again, I still really like how this one turned out. And yeah, technically we don't know for sure Venom's turning up in No Way Home, but it's been heavily hinted at that he's gonna be there, even just in a post-credit scene. Anyway, hope you like all the dragons. Let's take a look at this last one. Months ago, I was faced with an unusual conundrum. Dragons unlike anything I'd ever seen or heard of were appearing in my world, and for whatever reason were specifically hunting down Dracarachnia. I was quite certain these dragons were not native to my world, and after a few weeks, that theory was proven correct. As I was further studying the Octavian Clawdrake, a mystical dragon with 4 glowing wings, antlers, and a slender, almost aquatic body flew down towards us. It swirled its hands in an intricate pattern, which caused a glowing set of rings and symbols to appear above its head, and an orb of light to spawn before it. It hurled the orb at the Octavian Drake, and the creature vanished. Well, I have fully accepted magic as a part of my world and the creatures in it. This was blatantly beyond anything native to my home. I followed this mystical, stranger dragon as it hunted down the other unusual dragons whose presence in my world had puzzled me. When it finished its work, the creature created a portal for itself and flew through it. I followed after it curiously and found myself in a world similar to my own, but far more drenched in magical energy. There were more miraculous creatures, and beings such as cyclopses, orcs, and elves walked about as abundantly as humans. I could have stayed in this world for years studying its creatures, but I have my own duties in my world. So I simply spent a few hours there watching the mystical stranger dragon before returning home. As it had proven capable of in my world, this dragon revealed a further, wider range of magical abilities and a high level of intelligence. It was a remarkable creature that further entrenched fascination in me about the mysticism, and frankly the madness, out there in the multiverse. Now, Doctor Strange as a dragon presented an interesting problem because, as I've established in the world of the Beast Chronicler, Tayron's world where all my dragon episodes take place, there is magic, but it's not so massively obvious that a dragon like Doctor Strange here could just be there as a species doing all kinds of crazy magic things, but also taking away the massive magicalness of Doctor Strange would make the dragon not really represent him very well. So, thinking back to my Spider-Man No Way Home Dragons episode, where I mentioned the idea that these dragons might be from another world, set this up very well, because, it was Doctor Strange's fault, kind of, in Spider-Man No Way Home, that the Spider-Man villains were coming over to Spider-Man's dimension. So I just decided to have this dragon be from my Dungeons & Dragons universe, which is similar to Tayron's, but has way more crazy magic kind of stuff to it, and everyone just obviously knows about magic. For the design of this one, I also knew I wanted it to be quite unique. I was thinking of it as being a little bit more godly and deity-like almost because of how crazy, magical, powerful Doctor Strange is. And for some reason, whenever I'm thinking of a sort of deity kind of design, I think of a bit more symmetry to it, which is why I did something I very rarely do, and used the symmetry tool to draw the head and the wings. I think that turned out really well, and also for part of his coloring, I took some inspiration from Defender Strange, the darker suit with the red pattern running along the middle. Overall, I love the design. I think the background is a little bit, a bit bland, but I think the dragon's detailed enough that it's not super noticeable. Hope you all like the result. Let's take a look. Upon returning to my dimension, I soon after spotted a type of dragon I was much more familiar with. The Pimulus Ant Dragon may not be able to conduct mystical spells or make portals, but it is still quite incredible in its own right, as a creature that is native to my world. The Pimulus Ant Dragon spends much of its time at its regular size of roughly 12 feet long from head to tail, but can shrink down to 3 inches long. It often does this when moving long distances or eating. This dragon can only fly when it's shrunk down, as its insect-like wings are not proportionately sturdy enough to carry it when at full scale. Cleverly, as mentioned, it will also only eat at small size. This means despite it spending much of its time as a roughly horse-sized creature, it only needs to consume 1 ounce of food per week. The first time I saw one, it actually flew onto an orange slice I'd cut myself while out camping in search of the hawkshot needledrake, a creature I'll cover in a moment. The rapier I commonly carry was actually crafted by the hide of one of these creatures, so the tip can rapidly expand on impact and send opponents flying backwards. It's not as lethal as many of my other swords, but I tend to avoid bloodshed when it's an option, so my Pimulus sword suits my common combat needs. Notably, while these creatures are referred to as ants, they also somewhat resemble wasps, and this is more apparent in the females of the species, who have a yellow and black hide instead of a red one. They're also slightly more aggressive than the males, but neither are dragons you need worry about if spotted in the wild, as the species is generally pleasant towards humans. Now, this was the first dragon I knew I had to do for this episode, but it was also the one I was easily most excited to do, because for one, I'd referenced this dragon almost a year ago in my big Multiverse Tales crossover event where I first drew Tayron the Beast Chronicler, the guy narrating these episodes, because he mentions in the story that he has a Pimulus Ant Dragon sword, and in the drawing of him, he's carrying that sword, and yet I'd never drawn this dragon. So I was excited to do it for that reason, but also because I knew there was going to be a bunch of things about this one that I could do differently. For one, I could draw it at its really tiny size, so the environment would be a little bit different than usual. So I could draw really big blades of grass in the foreground, and as the environment goes farther and farther back, fade things out more and more, so it's like this is being taken with a really shallow depth of field kind of camera lens. But then also a fun challenge I knew was going to be trying to pull off the flapping, fluttering, insect-like wings. Because I've drawn some insect designs in the last little while that I really liked, like in the last Phobias as Demons episode, but whenever I've drawn insect creatures, I usually have them not looking like they're standing on the ground, and yet I just tend to draw the wings flat, as if they're not really moving, which doesn't really make sense, because if you're taking a picture of an insect flying, unless you have some insanely high shutter speed camera, the wings are going to be that super flappy, fluttery, super motion blurred kind of look. So I referenced a bunch of different images of insects in flight and tried to sort of replicate that by blurring out the wings a bit, having one sort of stable looking version of them that's a little bit blurred near the tips, and then having some faded versions of the wings to try and give it that fluttering look. I don't think I pulled it off perfectly, but for my first time actually trying to pull this off, I'm super happy with how it looks. I hope you all like it as well. Here is our Pimulus Ant Dragon. As mentioned, back when I discovered the Pimulus Dragon, I was seeking out a creature I'd heard tales of from archers in villages I'd passed through. They'd spoken of a dragon with very little in the ways of abilities or weapons, but with a specific skill that makes it particularly lethal when threatened. The hawk-shot needledrake is a wingless dragon with a bird-like beak and purple hide that stands at only about 6 feet tall while on all fours. Arguments have been made that it doesn't even qualify as a dragon, but I maintain the classification is justified. This creature can't breathe fire or lightning or even fly, but it can shoot needles from its tail with such precision that it could kill a squirrel from a mile away on a windy day. Its mind can process the elements around it and maneuver its tail with such flawless accuracy that it can hit whatever target it sets its eyes on. I've heard some claims that there are members of this species that can even shoot needles that freeze opponents or ignite them into flames, but I've yet to witness this myself or see any real evidence of it. Regardless, these creatures are widely revered by archers for their precision aim, and in regions that these creatures reside in, many archers will wear emblems representing the hawkshot's head as a symbol of their marksmanship. Some even take it as far as to slay hawkshots and consume their eyes, believing this will grant them the precise vision and accuracy of these creatures. This has never been proven to actually work, though admittedly I once took advantage of a situation in which I came across a warrior who had done this. I purchased the rest of the creature's hide, which he claimed to have no use for, and brought it to my armor crafting friend, Basilia, the same woman who crafted my Pimulus sword, to make me a suit of hawkshot armor. Not my most dependable armor for protection, but quite flexible and good for quick movement and archery. The hawkshots may not be miraculously gifted in terms of vast abilities or power, but they do the one thing they're known for better than any other creature, and oftentimes that is enough to face whatever predator may threaten them or their offspring. Now, anyone who's played a bunch of Monster Hunter will probably recognize that this is heavily inspired by a creature from that game, the Tobi-Kadachi, which never said out loud, I might be pronouncing it wrong. I tend to just call it Toby because that's part of its name and it's a funny name for a creature, but it's the same sort of scale as this dragon I'm drawing here, and it has that same ability where it can whip these needles off its tail to hit you, and I think they're electrified as well. I might be remembering its abilities wrong, it's been a while since I played Monster Hunter Rise, but anyway, partway through this design, well, I knew I really liked the idea of making this a fairly nerfed dragon with one ability that it can do really, really well, the needles shooting off its tail. I also thought, oh, maybe I should have given this dragon the ability to fly because, you know, Hawkeye literally has hawk in his name, but I felt like giving it the hawk-like beak worked well, and making it a drake kinda made this dragon a little bit more of an underdog who also has a really cool ability, and I felt like that worked pretty well for Hawkeye. Also, it was very fun getting to reference Vasilia Kuznet in this episode, the narrator of my Fantasy Armors episode. Having that series in the same universe as this series has been a lot of fun, because anytime I draw a dragon, I can use that dragon to be designed into an armor in a future episode. But anyway, quite pleased with this one. Pretty basic dragon, but, you know, that's kind of what I was going for. Hope you all like it. Let's take a look.
The final dragon I'll discuss is the only one today I'd advise staying far away from. It's hard to say if it specifically hunts humans or what its nature truly is, as they've always appeared to myself and others I've spoken to be very erratic. The Egyptian moon dragon, as expected from the name, can largely be found in the deserts of Egypt, though some have been reported to appear in the Americas or Europe at various times throughout history. These are very lean wyverns with bird-like skeletal heads. They are nocturnal, and the blades at the ends of their tails resemble a waning moon. I've read various accounts of them protecting humans and also attacking humans. It's quite difficult to pin down the hunting patterns of these creatures, as they can seemingly change attitude from night to night. Sometimes they'll aggressively assault creatures that come into their territory, and on other occasions they'll shy away from even creatures half their size. There are some ancient Egyptian texts referring to a creature similar to this one, describing it as a god of vengeance. Some referring to it as Khonshu, though it's hard to verify that the creatures described are these very creatures, as there are other wyverns that reside in this area with somewhat similar appearances. Now, while this creature doesn't exactly fit into the same theme as the other, more definitively human-friendly dragons I discussed today, I bring it up because I recently slayed one in protecting a group of travelers I happened upon. As is now my ritual to do when I acquire a creature's hide, I brought it to my crafting friend Vasilia, and the being I witnessed leaving her shop on my way in was, well, a discussion for a later date, but it was quite exciting for me. As for the Egyptian moon dragons, as said prior, avoid them at all costs. They aren't guaranteed to attack you, and may even protect you if you're threatened by another creature, but their actions are so unpredictable that staying in one's presence for too long is certainly not worth the risk. Okay, now Moon Knight isn't exactly definitively an Avenger, I don't think. He has been a secret Avenger before in the comics, so, that kinda justifies having him in this episode, but mostly I added him in because, a few people had suggested that I use him for this episode. The show's coming out soon, I'm excited for the show. Figured he could make a pretty cool, nocturnal kinda dragon, so I thought, alright, why not? Though, admittedly, as soon as I finished this drawing, I saw that Marvel had released a trailer for the Ms. Marvel show. She's more definitively a member of the Avengers, so I probably would have gone with her as a dragon if that trailer had come out sooner, but whatever, I was very happy to do a Moon Knight dragon, and I can't picture many people being too upset about the fact that I'm using him for this episode. I also thought it would be really fun to incorporate the moon into this drawing. I looked at a bunch of different comic book images of Moon Knight where artists had worked in the moon in different ways, and the idea I liked best was having the wings sort of surrounding the moon, and then using that as the rim lighting on the back of the character, and then kind of underlighting him to make him look a little bit creepier. I've been doing that more often in my horror-focused episodes, and I really like the result. I don't think it's as great here as in some of my other stuff, like my Hell of a Boss horror story episode or something like that, but I still think it's pretty cool and changes up the lighting from the other drawings in this episode. The main inspiration I was taking, besides from the Moon Knight costume, was from depictions of Khonshu, the god that gives Moon Knight his powers, who's usually drawn as having a really long, skeletal, bird-like beak head. By the way, the thing Tayron mentioned about an interesting person leaving Vasilia's shop as he was going in is a little teaser for the next episode on Monday. That'll be narrated by Tayron and Vasilia. Hope you all like the result. Here's the final dragon of the episode.
Now that I'm no longer the overseer of my world, there is an extra sense of relaxation to doing my old beast chronicling work. I will still actively look for opportunities to help my world, but there are now also occasions when I can simply go and study beasts purely for the joy of it, as I did recently when I set off for the Baxteros Peninsula. This area is rich in legends and history, and is most known for 4 unique breeds of dragon that reside only here and nowhere else in the world. While these types of dragons range from predatory to unassertive in nature, they will avoid conflicts with one another, for the most part. 2 of these breeds will have more common spats, but these will rarely end in one dragon killing the other. Instead, these conflicts will often be more akin to siblings fighting than a lethal brawl. One of these species is the Clobbering Grimstone. These dragons have skin made from a naturally occurring orangish-brown stone, like what can be found in the now dormant volcano of the Baxteros Peninsula. It is said that these creatures had more common scales in the past, and they resided predominantly inside the caves of the volcano, but it was triggered into activity by an ancient sorcerer. This man's title arises multiple times in the history of this region, as the Despot of Doom. When the volcano erupted, all of the Clobbering Grimstone's ancestors were buried in magma, but they had such a strong natural resilience to heat that they were able to survive with the molten rock coating their skin and merging with their biology moving forward, which is what allegedly caused their stony flesh. For this to be true, I believe a fair degree of magic would need to be a part of their story, but that isn't entirely unlikely, with the alleged activity the Despot of Doom is fabled to have in this region. Now for this episode, the drawings that you're seeing are actually done in the order I drew them in. I didn't rearrange them at all. And with this one, something I wanted to try doing, along with adding a few little flashes of Marvel Rivals style to it, which I think I definitely more successfully do with the last drawing in this episode, I wanted to add some impact. So I thought about having the dragon's tail smacking against something and shattering some rocks. But then I was like, I want this dragon to brawl a little bit more with his fists like the Thing would. So I decided to have him kind of backhanding a rock and having more rocks shattering off it. Taking some inspiration from a Daniel Warren Johnson drawing that I talked about in the most recent Illustrator Reacts, where my eye was very drawn to one part immediately, the main focal point, Batman in that case. And then there was like a surprise second area of focus of a bunch of dead bodies or something, but in this case, we focus first on the creature's head, and then because the rock's flying up behind him, we notice the impact he's making by pounding this stone. By the way, if you haven't been here in a while and you want to know why Tayrin isn't the overseer of his world, you can check out the Summoner's Beast storyline. That story's wrapped up now as like 12 episodes or something, and they'll catch you up on a lot of Multiverse Tales stuff. Anyway, let's take a look at this first dragon. The dragon that the Clobbering Grimstone is found to bicker with has wildly different biology. Clobbering Grimstones are drakes, known for their physical strength and durability, granting their name because they will literally clobber their prey on a hunt with their burly fists. In contrast, the Inferno Torchstorm is a very lean and nimble wyvern whose durability isn't particularly strong, though it has even more resistance to fire than the Grimstones have, as it can ignite its entire body in flames on command. It often does this as a show of intimidation if a predator approaches it. It has also been shown to do this as a way to frighten, or essentially prank, other creatures of the region, often specifically targeting the Grimstones when they're sleeping, awakening them with a start, then fleeing playfully. The Grimstones are far stronger, and when they get a hold of the Torchstorms can give quite a show of intimidation, but the Torchstorms are so fast that they rarely get caught. It helps that while Grimstones can leap surprisingly vast distances for their size, they cannot fly, while the Torchstorms have incredibly fast speeds when fully ignited in flames. Upon my latest visit to this region, I also saw an unexpectedly pleasant sight of an Inferno Torchstorm playing and racing with a Dracarachnia. The spider-like Dracarachnias are not native to this land, but their own territory is not far from here, so it wasn't totally shocking to see one in the area. Still, it was an unexpected treat to see two dragons I'd never heard to interact with one another, treating each other with an energy of friendship and playfulness. The Dracarachnia seem to enjoy the trickster-type nature of the Torchstorm more so than the Grimstones tend to. The first time I ever encountered the Fantastic Four in a comic book when I was younger was in an Ultimate Spider-Man crossover where the Human Torch and Spidey teamed up, and they have a long history of teaming up in the comics. So I knew I had to work in a little Spider-Man dragon reference from the third ever dragon episode I made in this series. But anyway, for this drawing I tried multiple color styles, and near the end ended up going with the simplest one, the one that's most similar to the original Human Torch dragon that I'd done 6 years ago. I wanted to try working in some of the blue that's often found in the Fantastic Four costumes. In the Marvel Rivals design, there's a bunch of blue and white. I tried working some of that in. I tried doing a mix of different ones. I tried one that was mostly blue with just a pop of red in the head, or orange in the head, but at the end of the day, I felt like the simplest one looked the best. And I ended up being really happy with this drawing, but I think the next two actually still compete for being my favorite of the episode. Now, as I said, while 2 of the famous dragons of this region have a tendency to brawl, there are also many recorded cases and legends of the 4 species of dragon working together to protect their home from attackers, whether human or otherwise. The first of these stories takes us back to a time when I cannot verify the tale's validity, but can still enjoy the speculation of it. The Despot of Doom had been the ruler of a nearby kingdom that no longer exists today, called Megalatveria. It was said that this despot, the Sorcerer King, could command magic beyond anything the world had seen. He'd have made Willis Aftirion of the Phasbian Kingdom quake in his boots, though there are accounts of the despot being far less vile than Aftirion. Some did consider him to be benevolent. Regardless, he was not satisfied with command over his own kingdom and created soulless suits of armor to control as an army as he sought out more lands to conquer. When he came to the Baxteros Peninsula, there was no significant kingdom ruling it, largely being made up of nature and a few small villages with little in the way of warriors. His soulless army marched on these lands and demanded that the people worship him. When one village refused, he used his magic to erupt the volcano and have its lava flood their home. It was soon after this that the 4 breeds of dragon from this region united to rebel and protect their land. The Clobbering Grimstones, who survived the eruption, united with the Torch Storms, as well as with 2 other species, one being the Invisible Chameleon. This is a type of chameleon dragon that can take its abilities farther than simply camouflaging. These creatures can render themselves entirely invisible. They also have a very unique type of flame breath that itself is also entirely invisible, save for the heat ripples you can make out if looking carefully enough. Though, be warned, it is just as hot as any other fire. These creatures tend to be far less aggressive than the previously mentioned dragons. They are omnivorous, and while they will consume small mammals and large insects, they often nourish themselves on plants and vegetation. This is why it is a unique occurrence when they willingly engage in combat, and the first account of this was to help force the Despot of Doom out of the Baxteros Peninsula. Now, I did consider giving the dragons in this episode more overtly magical superpowers, like giving this dragon the ability to create force fields instead of just invisible fire, but I wanted this to be kind of like a throwback to the old school dragon episodes on this channel, before Tayrin ever believed in magic. Like, he knows it exists now, but I wanted these dragons to pass as realistic to his world, even to his old self. While doing this drawing, I also found myself getting kind of emotional. For one thing, just seeing the dramatic difference in quality from the original version I'd drawn to how much I've improved artistically now with this thing turning out incredibly well. But also just kind of thinking back to when I started the channel and how much happier of a person I am now along with all the success that I've had. Like, I still got anxiety attacks regularly back then. From overworking myself, I didn't meditate back then, which is what got rid of the anxiety attacks on top of having so many other positive benefits for my life. And it's just, so many things are so much better now, and that felt like it was being emphasized by how much cooler this version of the dragon is. And I still actually kind of like the old drawing, but it's hard to argue that this one is just way better. And funny enough, the way that I drew some of the trees actually inspired how I did the next drawing in this episode. Because I didn't ink the trees like I do with most of my drawings before getting into the flat colors and then the shading and lighting stage, I just added a little bit of inks to it at the end. And that itself had a bit of a Marvel Rivals look to it, and I went, what if for my next drawing I just totally change my usual drawing format and see what that does? And I think it turned out super cool, but first, let's take a look at this. The fourth and final unique breed of dragon from this territory is often seen as the leader of these dragons when their kind gather. It has been proven to be highly intelligent, and while it cannot speak, I have personally interacted up close with one and seen very clearly that they can near perfectly understand human language and communicate back using gestures and imagery drawn in the dirt with their claws. These creatures heavily resemble dragons more commonly found in China, lacking wings and having long, lean bodies, but the fantastic Elastigons have the unique ability to stretch their bodies to up to 10 times their usual length. They have a very rare type of stretchy cartilage between their bones, and their flesh itself is extremely stretchy and durable. To make themselves look larger and more intimidating, they can even inhale massive amounts of air, expand their lungs to over 10 times their common size, stretching out their own ribcage, and making them look extremely muscular, for a short period of time before they need to exhale and continue breathing. These dragons, in unison with others of the region, have proven to be a fantastic fighting combination, and it's said swarms of these 4 dragons were enough to even force the powerful Despot of Doom out of their territory. Whenever Doom thought he'd found a way to defeat them, they'd combine their unique strengths and abilities in a new way that his soulless army couldn't anticipate, often rendering them useless. It is said he attempted to return multiple times with different means of defeating the dragons of Baxtros, but in each case, he was defeated or forced to retreat once again. In revisiting this territory, I heard no tales of any recent attacks from the villagers who still reside here, but if any did occur, I'd not be concerned for this place, as Baxtros has its own unique family of dragons waiting to protect it from whatever threats may come. Now, doing this drawing this way was so weird and so cool, and honestly, I may use this process for my drawings going forward. I'm not sure, we'll see. I'm definitely going to experiment with it more. But I'd also be curious if someone looked at this finished drawing, those of you that are very familiar with my work, and you didn't know that I did a different drawing process for this, would you be able to tell quickly that it was actually something different? Because I think the final result, while I love it, does look pretty similar to my usual stuff. You can see the difference as the drawing's going, but basically, usually, after I do the second round of rough lines, I'll do the refined inks, and then add my flat colors into that, and then do shading and lighting over that. This time, I just skipped the inking phase. I made a more refined silhouette of the character based on the rough line work, and then started adding in both different colors and the shading and lighting sort of at the same time. And then I also, in a few places, added in some pops of inks, where I thought it could just add some extra nice detail, and I think that's the thing that stands out to me most from this drawing, is that where I do add in inks, whether black inks or a few spots of blue ones inspired by Marvel Rivals, I think those inks stand out so much more because there's way less inks than usual in the drawing. It gives it a sort of Spider-Verse, Marvel Rivals, even a little bit of Arcane kind of vibe to it. I thought this might take less time than usual because I was skipping a full step, but the drawing took about 3 hours and 20 minutes, which is pretty similar to what this would have taken if I did my usual process. In fact, I'd say this probably would have taken like maybe 2 hours and 50 minutes, because this background is very simple, and this dragon doesn't have wings, so there's less limbs to render. But I was also experimenting with a new process where I kinda knew what I was doing, but also kind of didn't at all. So I don't know, I didn't expect to try changing up my drawing formula in this episode, but I am super excited to try this again, and I'm very happy with the result. I even decided, along with putting up these 4 posters, to make one big poster of the whole team. So that'll be linked in the description as well. But let's take a look at Mr. Fantastic as a dragon. I've reached a point where I know I should stop being surprised when an ancient and legendary breed of dragon reveals itself to still be alive in the world I call home. With the Archon Toralei now working as the overseer of my world, magic has continued to reawaken, and creatures with more mystical and unusual abilities have become more commonplace. I was recently blessed with a sighting of a creature that was thought to only be a distant ancestor of a more common species still around today, if it ever existed at all. While I have seen many iron-plated sky dragons in my life, it was only this week that I first got to witness an iron-plated sky pulse. I disregarded these creatures as having existed once, but now have full evidence that they are as real as the legend said. The tale of these creatures goes that they themselves only evolved into their iron-plated form as an offshoot of a once common dragon breed called a Scarlet Stark. They were named after a wealthy adventurer, Tobias Stark, who is seeking to discover a new form of energy, hoping to harvest magic from powerful creatures, though intending to do so without harming them. Despite them seeming fairly unimpressive as far as dragons go, upon studying the Scarlet Stark's blood and fallen scales, Tobias saw incredible potential in these creatures. Their biology struck him as naturally incredibly adaptable to their surroundings. He felt they could absorb traits, both natural and magical, of their surroundings and meld it with their own forms and physiology in a matter of years, instead of over millennia of evolution. He intended to test this theory by simply granting some simple enchanted pieces of armor to bind to their arms or tails, unintrusive elements to see if their bodies would adapt traits of them over a few years. Unfortunately, an old adventuring ally of Stark's turned warmonger felt this would be too slow of a pace to test these creatures' potential. He cared significantly less about their well-being. This man, who to history is simply referred to as the Monger, had recently lost a series of battles to an army called the Revellium. He wanted to never face such defeat again and hoped to give his army a draconic upgrade. Having sent scouts to spy on Tobias, the Monger learned of his research, sent forces to the home of these dragons, and captured as many of them as his forces could wrangle, even taking Stark himself captive when he protested. The Monger trapped all of the dragons he'd taken, and Tobias, inside a series of iron mines that had been abandoned for their toxic fumes. The Monger hoped these dragons would adapt to project an amplified version of these toxic fumes themselves, and become hardened creatures, due to being surrounded by the stone and iron walls. In a sense, this did work, but far better than the Monger had hoped. In a matter of months, a few dozen Scarlet Starks trapped inside changed in size, color, durability, and strength. Their blood itself, influenced by the fumes, shifted from red to a glowing cyan color, along with changing their eyes. The basic flames that they were once able to breathe transformed into condensed beams, far more powerful than they'd been prior. Their once flimsy scales became hardened and metallic, adapting the iron around them. Stark himself tended to the dragons, despite his health rapidly declining from the fumes that were empowering these creatures. Thankfully, as he helped them, they then helped him. While it is uncertain how the dragons knew this would aid him, some allowed him to drink small doses of their altered blood. This itself somehow was able to make Tobias immune to further harm from the fumes. It also meant, when the time came, he was ready to lead the dragons in fighting back. Using some fallen and broken pieces of their now upgraded scales, Tobias built himself a suit of armor, in which he could aid them in the battle to come. Eventually, an old ally of Stark's, an army general in his own right, Jameson Rhodes, learned of Stark's situation and was able to release all the locks and chains holding the door that kept the dragons in their iron mine keep. Stark and the dragons then attacked the army of their captors, using their new immense strength and power to wipe the Monger and all his forces from the face of the earth. Since there were only a few dozen of these dragons in the mines, and they did have a proclivity for mating with many other dragons outside their own species, it was believed that over a few centuries, they ceased to exist in this originally altered form, and the closest remnant of them was the iron-plated sky dragon. I am very pleased and surprised to see that at least one of this original empowered breed is still alive in the modern day, and I hope it is possible to see a full resurgence of these creatures in the future. Now, Kiefer's Iron Man submission here, I think, is so much cooler than my original Iron Man dragon design that I did back in the first Avengers as Dragons episode. My very first turning superheroes into dragons episode, not counting the original Fantastic Four Dragons episode, which I've since rebooted. But this one is just so cool looking. I was super excited to draw this one. Kiefer clearly has some high level art skills. And as I did in that last Bustar Terminax episode that came out last week, maybe the previous episode put out on here, I think, I do color variants for all of the dragons submitted in this episode based on the fact that Marvel Rivals has alternate skins for all of these characters anyway. So the alternate color schemes that I do in this episode are based on existing alternate color schemes in the game. So for Iron Man here, once I'm done, and I don't record the alternate color scheme changing for all of them because it only takes like a couple minutes to change the color scheme. But for this one, I do very briefly show me doing it at the end, and I use the skin that was, and might probably still is, free to get for Iron Man, the alternate color scheme that's more like black and gold. I forget which one it's called. But I think it's a really cool alternate color scheme, and honestly, in terms of my version of Kiefer's drawing, I don't know which color scheme I like better. I think they both look really cool. Not all of the alternate color schemes work out as well as this one, but I think it was a fun thing to do, especially for this episode. So let's take a look at the finished version of our new Iron Man dragon. There is another species of dragon that I had never seen in person, but am now told is making a significant resurgence. I knew these creatures did exist, but once thought elements of their physiology were simply being exaggerated by more eccentric beast chroniclers. This species is uncommon in that the males and females of its kind are given different names and have very distinct appearances and abilities from one another. You wouldn't even know they were necessarily related unless you had studied them. The females are called ethereal dagger claws, and the males are referred to as black-crested shade cloaks. These creatures will mate for life and spend the majority of their time together, practically attached at the hip. With that said, the shade cloaks are the one with a drive to hunt for food for itself, its partner, and its young. They have the unique ability to wrap their wings around prey and drain the life out of them. When the process is complete, all that remains is a corpse to be fed upon. Contrarily, the dagger claws actually have the ability to heal common injuries, or at least speed up the healing process, using a glowing white energy that projects from their fangs and claws. Though, fair warning, while the dagger claw is not as prone to combat as the shade cloaks, they are still capable of it, especially if you, or a perceived foe, threaten their partner or their young. Some say that being engulfed in the shade cloak's wings when it is not threatening you can have an effect on the mind similar to strong forms of psychedelics. Some suggest that it can even awaken dormant mystical abilities in someone. Though, if I do see these creatures myself sometime in the near future, I think I'll do so at a distance. I encounter enough mind-bending events and creatures in my life as it is. Now, Funkin' Forever's submission of Cloak and Dagger was awesome, but to be honest, this was a tough character competition-wise, because I got a lot of submissions for Cloak and Dagger, and lots of them were really cool. It was a tough choice. It became clear that I had to pick a Cloak and Dagger one, because I didn't necessarily realize they were one of the most played characters in the game, but apparently they are. I don't think I've actually tried them out in the game, but I guess that might also partially make sense because, you know, they get picked by people a lot, so someone on my team probably usually has one. Anyway, I hope it's not super noticeable. I'm going to try and cut out all the evidence of it, but my drawing tablet was glitching out a bunch while I did this drawing, so I was kind of sporadically starting, stopping, trying to fix the tablet. I think I got it figured out now, but I was kind of worried as that was happening that was going to mess up this drawing. And I will say this drawing looks fairly distinct, but I'm very happy with it. I would say it looks a bit cartoonier than most of my dragon drawings, but to me that almost makes it look like a Wings of Fire cover. I've done a Wings of Fire episode before, and I talked about the covers for it a bunch in an Illustrator Reacts episode. I think it was the one with Bone on the thumbnail. And I'm not saying that this drawing ends up being as good as Joy Ang's Wings of Fire covers, which I think are absolutely beautiful and incredible, but I just think the style of the dragon's heads and shapes and stuff like that makes it feel to me like it has major Wings of Fire vibes to it. Anyway, of the Cloak and Dagger submissions, I think Funkin' Forever's was my favorite, and I'm glad I chose this pairing. And this is the one in the episode where I think the alternate color scheme doesn't work as well. I do another version that is I think they called it like lemon and lime color skin for Cloak and Dagger. One thing you will notice for the alternate color schemes that I think subscriber who got chosen for the last community redraw, Super Blonde Nerd, pointed out in the Bust Our Terminax episode I did recently where I was doing the alternate color schemes, is that I also change the color of the backgrounds, whether it's a graphic design background or in this case a actual drawn background, so that there is the still contrast between the characters with their changed color and the background behind them, so that they stand out nicely against it. So one thing you'll notice in this one is in the original drawing, the background is like a blue to greenish tint kind of background, and then in the version where I change them to being yellow and green themselves, I make the background more of a blue to purple kind of color. Again, just to help them stand out a little bit more. I do think both are cool enough, but again, I think the original's the coolest, and I guess you can all decide for yourself. Let's take a look at both.
Have you ever wanted to see Ares, the Greek god of war, eating a sandwich? Well, that is just one of many bonus drawings that you can find in the book release of Mythal, which is officially out today. This is the first project I've made in years and years that has exclusive artwork that I made just for this book. You can't find it anywhere else, including an epic double splash page on pages 56 and 57 that I'm super happy with the result of. The book also has all of the art that officially came out with the series Mythal as it was coming out on the channel last year. It's a mythology-based action-adventure story that works in monsters and gods from many different mythologies, and also serves as kind of a prequel to a lot of stuff in multiverse tales, involving Tarsa's origins and the Archon's origins and stuff like that. Also, there's a little bonus gallery of extra PopCross Studios art at the back of the book, stuff that I'm super happy with, and thought would just be nice to throw in at the end. Also, let's see how much people want Mythal 2. Because see, I have an idea for a sequel to Mythal that could just be like 3 episodes or something, or I could flesh it out into an entire another series and book. So, if the paperback and ebook version of Mythal sell 1,111 copies in its first month, so by May 1st, then I will officially greenlight a full sequel to Mythal. And I've already got lots of ideas for that story, so let's see how this goes. But anyway, it's up on Amazon now. I hope you all like it and the bonus artwork in it. A lot of work went into this, and I hope you enjoy. But now, back to more Marvel Rivals Dragons.
Thinking about creatures that work in tandem, as the Dagger Claw and Shade Cloak do, actually reminded me of a creature I learned of in another dimension I visited in the past, and likely will visit again. The Archon demon Cypheramov, prior to her passing, had once invaded dimension D107. Her mechanical demon infections had altered many of the miraculous creatures from this realm into brutal killing machines to do the demon's bidding. She was forced out of this realm and eventually lost her physical form, but since her defeat was not dealt by my ally Alexis Jones, also known as the Reaper, Cypheramov's demons were not all wiped out along with her, meaning many still remain in D107 and in other realms she has attacked. Many of the demons are simply still acting on the instruction they'd been given originally, to attack, kill, and spread their infection if possible. One rare case has ceased its assault, however, in D107, due to it symbiotically bonding with a creature that was not infected itself. The infected creature was called a venomous Dracoremedus, and the uninfected a symbiotic Dracorantura. Both of these actually bear a striking resemblance to a species found in my world called the Dracorachnia. The venomous Dracoremedus, infected with Cypheramov's virus, had become partially mechanical and very hostile to all other creatures and beings. In spite of this, a particularly bold, uninfected, symbiotic Dracorantura, often known to bond with members of the Dracoremedus species, saw an opportunity to merge with an enhanced version of its own common partners. It stuck itself to the back of the infected Dracoremedus, and the two bonded. But it seems the Rantura was not then infected by Cypheramov's virus as well. That is what I would have expected to happen. Instead, the unified version of this creature is aggressive and hostile, but does not seem to be driven to mindless slaughter the way Cypheramov's other infected creatures are. It is as though this unified creature's consciousness is like a blend of the infected creature and the uninfected symbiotic Dracorantura, making it more aggressive than is common, but not to a demonic extent. While it has been reported that these creatures can separate from each other when the situation requires it, they spend the majority of their time fused together as one unified beast. Together, they are able to spit webbing, as well as toxic plasmic blasts. They can superheat their claws to carve through even the toughest shields. Their armor is also extra durable, enhanced by Cypheramov's metallic virus. Now, this tale was told to me secondhand by another from my home realm, Vasilia Kuznet. Allies of hers, calling themselves the Secret Knights, were the ones to encounter this creature, and struggled to scare it off from approaching an ill-protected village. Because of this, some details may be altered, as Vasilia does occasionally embellish the tales she's been told, but regardless, this does sound like a fascinating variant on a creature I'm very familiar with from my own realm. Now, Glitchy Ronin always submits awesome stuff, and I have redrawn some of Glitchy Ronin's stuff before, but this one was just next level. The multiple designs, the mixing it with Cypheramov's demons that invaded my Dungeons & Dragons universe.
having a Peni Parker dragon be a variant of the Spider-Man dragon from Tayron's universe, leaning into the multiverse stuff both in my multiverse and in Spider-Verse. There are just so many brilliant layers to this. So Glitchy Ronin, fantastic job. I did make some tweaks to the lore because Glitchy Ronin suggested that Cypheremov's demons, now that Cypheremov is dead but wasn't killed by Alexis Jones, her demons would then kind of go dormant, I think is what Glitchy Ronin originally said. And I tweaked that because that's not how I see it. Canonically, I wouldn't have necessarily expected people to know this, but if an Archon is killed and not by the Reaper, their demons do continue to stay alive and just keep acting on the last orders they were given. So that was one of the reasons I had to tweak the lore a little bit. Cypheremov's demons also now, if they're given new orders by Tarsa, because Tarsa has taken over Cypheremov's abilities, they'll then do whatever Tarsa says. But outside of that, they're just acting on the last thing Cypheremov instructed them to do. Now with this one, I also decided to do a alternate color scheme, even though I was hesitant on this one because the Venom skin that Glitchy Ronin was working off of, which is my personal favorite skin for Peni Parker in Marvel Rivals so far, it isn't just an alternate color. It has different shapes, like it's got the mandible type things coming off its head. So I was like, it doesn't make as much sense to do the regular red color variant, like Peni Parker's normal skin that you have for her in the game, as just a color variation on this one that I'm drawing here. But then I was like, oh, what the heck, it's not going to take me that long to do, let's do it anyway. Add a little bit more blue than Peni Parker has in the game, so it's more like a classic Spider-Man sort of look as well. And I'm super glad I ended up doing that, because, to be honest, no, I do think the purple version still works better, but I think this might be my favorite original and alternate color scheme combination for this episode. But of course it helps that Glitchy Ronin's submission was epic, fantastic job. Now let's take a look at the finished artwork. Focusing once more on my own realm, another fascinating creature I've observed is the Magnesian Drake, or more specifically, a rather dangerous variant of them. Some claim that these creatures were the original ancestors of a breed called the Sokovian Scarlet Drake, which may have come about as a result of them both having a similar M-shaped crest or form on their heads, but I think this connection is unfounded. The Magnesian Drakes are not particularly miraculous in their own right, but there is a mutated offshoot of them that is incredibly rare and powerful. These creatures in their original form are named for the magnesium spikes and plating that naturally form and grow across their bodies. And as the name of the original version of the species suggests, they are drakes and are unable to fly. But the mutated variant of them have an odd change to their name, in that they are referred to as the magnetic winged drake. It is a bit of an odd name, but understandable given that they are definitively proven to have been a mutated offshoot of the Magnesian Drakes, albeit ones that have grown wings. And on top of that, they have the inherent magical gift to attract and, to some degree, control metallic minerals in their environment. They can attract these minerals onto their wings, bodies, heads, and tails to further armor plate and protect them. They have even been known to form blades on the ends of their tails with which to fight. Using this ability, they can easily strip hunters of their weapons, so long as the weapons are forged with some type of metal. I have seen but one of these in person myself, and it was from a great distance. I also promptly needed to flee, as these creatures, while they are incredibly gentle towards drakes and other dragons, violently despise humans. To be fair, humans have relentlessly hunted their kind for the rare form of magnesium that grows on their bodies, but unlike creatures such as the monsters of song, who we've made some headway in repairing relations with, there seems to be no convincing these winged drakes that humans could ever be a safe ally to them. They have even been known to specifically seek out and hunt parties of dragon hunters and ruthlessly slaughter them, even if these hunters were not seeking their own kind. These dragons also seem to have natural leadership qualities, as they have been known to goad and convince other dragons into fighting humans under their command. I hope to one day be able to encourage one of these creatures to consider me an ally, but I hold no grudge against them for not feeling kindly towards humans, considering what we've done to them in the past.
Now, Hayden is another person who's submitted tons and tons of awesome art before, and I was super excited to see a really good version of Magneto coming in from Hayden. And I was super excited to do this one, though I do think I failed this one a little bit on the pose. I still like how it turned out overall. It's pretty cool looking, and I love Magneto's design in Marvel Rivals. Hayden's version, giving him a little bit more of a carved up and damaged sort of look, I thought was cool. I might have cleaned it up a little bit more than Hayden did, but I knew what would be fun for this one is doing the alternate color schemes, because obviously the version in Marvel Rivals is more of a silvery and black kind of look, but Magneto's more traditional look is more red and purple, and they do have an alternate color scheme of him in the game that looks like that as well. I could also tell in Hayden's drawing that Hayden had kind of erased out the floating metal ring behind Magneto, and my guess for that is that Hayden realized when Magneto makes the sword for himself to fight with, he uses the ring behind him to form that, so he wouldn't necessarily have both at once. That's just me guessing what Hayden was thinking here, but I decided to have a bit of both in there anyway, the bladed tail and the ring behind him, because I was just like, they're both cool elements, I want to have them in there. Again, I think I could have come up with something a little bit more interesting for the pose on this one, but overall I think it's pretty cool. And I hope you all enjoy it and the color variant of it, so let's take a look. Something I did not take full advantage of when I was the overseer of my world is the fact that I could create dragons and creatures, possibly spawning whole new species to become native to my world in the long term. I did this on a few occasions and have no regrets about my time as overseer, but I was reminded of this ability when the current overseer, Toralei, showed me a creation of her own that may very well be helpful in the future, or in the least make a positive addition to our world. The creature didn't look like much when I first observed it, as it was encased within a 30-foot tall cocoon. It rested in the forests just outside the village of Sethiel, where Toralei has built her home. She claimed that her intention with this creature was to make something as powerful as a certain begrudging, unkillable ally of mine, but with a much more positive aura to it. Her first result didn't turn out quite so mighty as the unkillable dragon, Snagbazmor, but when the golden cocoon erupted into light and revealed what was forming within, I must say I was quite impressed with her work, including in terms of the name she gave it, Adamas, the Rebirth Wyvern. The gold and crimson dragon quickly showed an innate understanding of human languages, despite not speaking them itself, and proved itself to be very intelligent and empathic. It also has impressive healing abilities, like an even more amplified version of that of a young ally of mine, Jake Tajin. It can breathe two varying beams of light from its maw, one to cause damage to its opponents, and the other to heal injuries on itself and others. In fact, its healing abilities on itself are more impressive still. To test her creation, Toralei unleashed an enraged gargantuan smasher dragon into its same region, and the two promptly got into a brawl, as the Adamas saw the smasher as a threat to that area's residents. It held its own in the battle despite the smasher's immense strength. That itself was quite impressive, and it managed to weaken the dragon enough to cease its rampage. The Adamas itself, unfortunately, looked like its own injuries were serious enough that it may pass on, but that was when I saw the evidence of why its name is so fitting. Before its life could slip away, without anyone else aiding it, the creature enveloped itself in a cocoon, like the one it had been birthed from, and promptly began to glow. Toralei told me to return in a few days, and by the time I did, the creature had already re-emerged and was in perfect health. I was very impressed and very appreciative when she allowed me to make the creature one of my Beast Summon allies, so I can call upon it in future conflicts. I did inquire if Toralei had intentionally made the creature resemble the former artifact known as the Multiversal Orb, given she and her fellow Archons were the ones who created it, but she said that the aesthetic similarities were purely a coincidence. Now, I'll probably have to elaborate on this a little bit, but to me, this looks like one of the purest community redrawings that I've ever done, in the sense that
it's very, the drawing that I've done is very similar to Richard Shirley's original pose, and I love that original drawing, but it's also a much simpler rendering style than what I do. So doing a similar pose, having us looking up at the creature a little bit more, and doing my level of rendering on it, like, I think looking at these two right next to each other is just really, really cool to me. I love both the original, and I love my version of it. The one tweak on it that I would make if I was doing this again is with I've been kind of messing around with how I do grass lately, trying to figure out a way that's like a little cartoony but still matches the rest of my rendering. I've found that the way I do grass sometimes is a little bit too busy and noisy and distracting. But then sometimes when I'm trying to do a little bit more cartoony version, it's a little bit too simple. So I was trying to find that blend, but while I was doing that, I wasn't thinking about the fact that I kind of liked the idea that this was the dragon landing, and there was going to be like a bit of a wave of dust and smoke, well, not smoke, but yeah, I guess just dust and dirt getting kicked up as it's coming down for a landing. And if I was going to do that, the grass should have been getting blown as well. So I thought about adding that puff of smoke and cloudiness on the ground, but then I was like, that's the fact that the grass is just kind of standing straight up would contradict that. And now that I'm saying it out loud, it might not have been that noticeable. Like the fact that I'd already done the grass not looking like it was wavy probably could have added in that dust wave anyway, and it would have added a bit more movement to this piece. But either way, I don't think this one really needed it. I'm still very happy with how this one turned out. And it's one of those submissions where Adam Warlock isn't one of my personal favorite characters in the game or in movies and comics or anything. So it's a character that I probably never would have picked to use for a Marvel Dragons episode either. So the fact that Richard Shirley submitted something that made me go, oh yeah, this is going to be a great version of Adam Warlock. I think that's one of the nice things about having done this as a community redraw prompt. And I like the idea of doing more stuff like this in the future, getting subscribers to submit a classic PopCross prompt, and then I pick ones to redraw. It also means that I don't have to study the lore as much for characters I don't know because other people are submitting lore for them, and I'm just adapting and tweaking it. Anyway, I love how this one turned out, and let's take a look at the finished result and the color variant. While Toralei may intend to make the Adamas into a full species of wyvern eventually, for the moment it is a unique individual, much like another creature that was on my mind as of late. It is a beast that is incredibly elusive, and tales state that it originally resided in Germany, but has been allegedly seen on the hunt in various places around the globe. It has a cryptid-like reputation, with many people telling their tales of brief encounters with it, so it is difficult to say who is being truthful and who simply wanted a good story to tell around the fire or the pub, but I do know for a fact that the so-called Winter Warrior dragon does indeed exist, and if the legends are true, then it was not always a dragon. During a centuries-old conflict, a human by the name of James Buchanan was a skilled knight, working under the orders of Captain Stefan Rogers. Buchanan was Rogers' second-in-command, and they were incredibly close friends, which is where rumors of Buchanan's involvement in the creation of the Winter Warrior begins. Their foes were a collective of hateful sorcerers, calling themselves the Crimson Crests. They took inspiration for their mentality, name, and appearance from the beast known as the Crimson Crested Hydra, famous for its aggressively violent nature, as well as its resilience to return even after having its head severed. In his final battle with the Crimson Crests, Buchanan had his arms severed, then fell from a tall cliff, presumed by most to have promptly lost his life. Rogers was devastated by the loss of his close friend, but continued to lead his soldiers with determination, eventually taking a significant victory against the Crests. A decade or so later, during which time the Crimson Crests had gone quiet, they re-emerged, with a ferocious beast being sent to hunt down the most famous leaders of their prior opposing forces. It was a mighty dragon with an enhanced armored arm in place of its biological arm on one side, the same side where Buchanan had lost his own limb. The vicious dragon managed to kill multiple army captains and high-ranking knights, who had been thorns in the side of the Crimson Crest. That is until it was sent after Stefan. Rogers had heard rumors that the beast may be coming for him and prepared. His soldiers stood by his side when the dragon came, and a brawl did ensue. But when the Winter Warrior was given an opportunity at a possibly fatal blow on Stefan, it hesitated. Some say that in the deafening pause of that moment, the only thing that could be heard, very faintly rumbling through the beast's own throat, was Stefan's name. The dragon couldn't bring itself to kill Stefan, and it fled. Never again did it go after the enemies of the Crimson Crests, and in fact, some of their own leaders began to mysteriously vanish, with many presuming the Winter Warrior began hunting them down instead. The assumption is obvious that the Crimson Crests used their sorcery to turn Captain Rogers' fallen ally into a dragon to do their bidding, but then it refused to take the life of its former ally. This wouldn't be the first time a human had been turned into a dragon in my world. Is this story true? My personal assumption nowadays is yes, though we may never know for certain how this incredible beast came to be. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to do multiple episodes for the Marvel Rivals Dragons community redraw is because a lot of the people that I was most heavily considering to have their characters redrawn were people who have been redrawn in past community redraws. Having one of your characters picked in the past doesn't mean you never can again. Plenty of people have had their characters redrawn a couple times, sometimes even 3 times in the history of this channel, because I've been doing community redraws for like 6 years now or something. But if someone has been picked before and I remember them, I'll generally weigh that in. So like if it comes down to someone who has been picked before and someone who hasn't, I'll be like, okay, let's go with the person who hasn't been picked before. In this redraw, both this and the first one, there are a few people that have gotten picked multiple times now because of this episode. And funny enough, Joshua here, whose creature I'm redrawing, and Harrison, who's getting redrawn next, both of them have been redrawn in the past, I'm pretty sure in the same episode, in the Bust Our Terminax Dungeons and Demons episode. And that was just purely coincidental if I have that right, I'm pretty sure I do. But anyway, I was also really excited to do a Winter Soldier dragon, because that's a character who even well before Marvel Rivals has become something that I'm obsessed with. Winter Soldier is a character that I've considered many times to turn into a dragon in one of my Marvel Dragons episodes. He's one that I always thought would make a really cool character, and you know, the idea had come to mind of working in like a biomech to his lore or something like that. But again, this episode was nice for the fact that I didn't really have to pick the lore myself, you know, just make some tweaks to what was sent in by Joshua for this one. I also do a color variant on this one as well, like I've been doing on a bunch of stuff lately. And you know, sometimes they work out better than others. In this one, I do really like the result to a point where I might even like the color variant better. But one thing that I have to think about when I'm doing the color variants is when switching from this version, the main version, and the blue version that I do just at the end of this drawing, one thing that changes significantly is the Winter Soldier's arm goes from being a very bright silver to a darker black. And when doing that, the lighting and shading effects that I've done on top of my flat layer, which is the layer on which I'm changing the colors, will have a different impact on them, like the glow will be lessened on a much darker arm. So sometimes what I might do is just add a little bit more brightness, like even double the light layer and just like keep the part on the parts where I've changed it to a significantly darker section on the character. But in this case, it made the arm look a little bit more matte and a little bit less shiny, and I actually kind of like that, so I just stuck with it for this one. And that also just makes it one of the alternate color schemes that I think changes things a little bit more significantly and makes it really cool to let us see both versions of this. I'm really glad I've started doing this alternate colors thing. Anyway, let's take a look at both of them. Looking a little farther north than the Winter Warrior is said to make its home, there is a species of drake found in Russia, with an ability that I now question the full breadth of. It is a beast called the Magiclim Drake. It is only around 12 feet in length if you don't count the burly blade at the end of its tail, referred to as its soul fang. However, for its small stature it is incredibly ferocious as a fighter. The ability of which I spoke is its ability to create portals to a pocket dimension and disappear into that only to reappear wherever else in my world it seeks to respawn, or simply choosing to remain in that pocket dimension for some time. Long ago, I simply believed this to not be true. Then there was a period in which I accepted that this was entirely likely as an ability for them to have, but personally assumed that the pocket dimension they were transporting into was a place that I've accessed with the people of the mining colony Isles, which they refer to as the Nether. Now, I'm uncertain. I returned to the mining colony Isles recently to check on the residents there and allies I've made there, and mentioned these drakes, but they stated they'd never seen these creatures I described in the Nether, meaning it is very unlikely that that is where these creatures go. Toralei stated that she wasn't familiar enough with these creatures to know where they go either, but she doesn't sense when they transport in and out of our main plane of our dimension. The only reason this is a slight possible concern is if there is any way these creatures are leaving our dimension through some back way that, as the Overseer, Toralei isn't familiar with, there is the slightest risk that this could also give the Archon demons another way into this dimension, a dimension which is otherwise locked off to them. This is unlikely to be a real concern though, it's simply something that's worth considering. Anyhow, regardless of the possible concerns, these creatures are intriguing indeed, and there are many variants of them that have been seen in our world. There is the Amethyst Magiclim Drake that is simply a slightly varying color scheme to the original, then there is the Eldritch Magiclim that is far more heavily armored with an icy blue tail, there is the Frozen Magiclim, the Hellpunk, and possibly even more that I've not seen myself. One thing that all of the variants share is the ability to transform into an alternate form, one in which they are even more ferocious and dangerous. It is referred to as the Dark Drake form, and possibly draws energy from the realm they transport into. It makes them stronger, faster, grow larger horns atop their head, turns their feet into cloven hooves, and makes them grow up to 20 feet in length. They can only remain in this form for a few minutes at a time, but if you're on the opposing end of one of these creatures when they choose to change into this state, it is very unlikely that you'll live to see them return to normal. Now, Mad About Boost did an awesome job on this Magik submission, and there were a lot of really cool Magik submissions. I love Magik as a character and was really excited to do a dragon version of her, and was actually kind of surprised that all of the all the ones at the top of my head anyway that I remember for her were all drakes. And I don't remember if there was justification for all of them as to why people went with drakes. I think if I was doing Magik myself, I would have made her a dragon with wings, but that's not a critique or anything, that's just, you know, where my mind would have gone. But I really, really liked Mad About Boost's submission, and I'm quite happy with my version of it, but there's some things that are holding it back that I think it could have been like one of my favorite dragons that I've done in ages, but just some things about the pose don't quite work for me. And like, I like a lot of elements of how this drawing turned out. I love the idea of having a portal open behind her, giving a hint at the realm that she transports into. I like how the tail is swooping and I've got some energy coming off the back, inspired by a few different images of Magik from Marvel Rivals. I like the rendering on her, mostly the idea of the pose I really like, but I think if I'd just done something like maybe bend her head a little bit farther down closer to center frame, or bent the tail a little bit more up so it was a little bit more horizontal and have more of that energy swoop kind of going behind the dragon's head, that might have just helped frame it a little bit more and fix the things about it that I don't totally love. And I hadn't actually originally planned to do color variants for this one because Magik's main color variant of her same costume is very similar to her original, like it's a pretty subtle color change, but given Mad About Boost actually worked the Marvel Rival skins variants into the lore that was submitted, felt like I had to do at least one color variant. So let's take a look at both of those now. Wow, you actually watched this compilation all the way through to the end. Thank you very much for that, and if you enjoyed it, you might want to check out some of my non-Marvel Dragons episodes. I've done an episode doing general superheroes with characters like Invincible and Hellboy, or I've done a few DC Dragons episodes as well. Those will both be linked on the screen, but either way, have a great day.